We've not received any questions in advance of today's meeting. However, we do have one observer this morning for one of the items on the agenda. Very warm welcome to Jane Carroll, Senior Officer at the Royal College of Nursing in Wales, who's attending the meeting to observe our discussions on the shift patterns report. Just a couple of practical points. We've got a large number of reports in front of us this morning, and if I could just ask those presenting reports to highlight the key points and draw board members' attention to anything that might have changed since the reports were drafted. Can I also offer a very warm welcome to Bethan Jones, Local Safety Champion Midwife at Welsh Ambulance Services Trust, Mike Jenkins, the Regional Clinical Lead for South East Wales. Both are here to present the listening and learning story at item 3.1. And Harrod Euler, Head of Midwifery at CTM, is also here to present for this item. Very good to see you this morning. Also very warm welcome to both Neil Mesher and Councillor Paul Deanick, who are, although it does feel as though they joined the board some time ago, are both joining their first public meeting of the board. A very warm welcome to you two as new members of the board. We're also joined this morning by Daniel Price, Regional Director for Plaes Cymru. Hayley Jones, our Deputy Director for People, is attending to take part in the discussions on agenda items 3.2 and 6.3. Good morning, Hayley. Good to see you this morning. Callie Hamblin, our Assistant Director of Governance and Risk, is deputising for Gareth Watts, who is away this week. And Sally Davis, our Deputy Medical Director, is deputising for Dom Herford, our Executive Medical Director. Lisa Curtis-Jones is also joining virtually this morning on Teams, so good morning to Lisa as well. 1.2, apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Kath Palmer, the Vice Chair, Dilys Juvenat, Rachel Rowlands, Gareth Watts, Dom Herford, and Vicky Oxley. So unless anything needs to be raised under item 1.3, declarations of interest on any of the matters that are covered in the agenda. I'll just move to the consent agenda item just to check the colleagues have had the opportunity of reviewing those matters that are covered in the consent agenda and to see whether any of those items need to be brought forward for fuller discussion. Is board happy that they are left where they are? Yep. Okay, we'll come back to those further this morning. Okay, moving on to our shared listening and learning story. This is in respect of our maternity services. And I know we've got a presentation this morning, and I think a video attached to that. So I'll hand over to, I think, to Bethan and to Mike at this stage. Thank you very much.
Just conscious that they're not going to see us online. Is that
They won't be
okay?
able to see the slide deck.
No, see us.
Yeah,
We're going to get
Sorry, don't worry, they'll see us. Okay. That's fine. Yeah.
Bore da, my name's Beth and I'm a midwife working in the Welsh Ambulance Service.
And I'm Mike Jenkins. I'm the Regional Clinical Lead Consultant Paramedic for South East Wales.
So we're delighted to come here this morning to share the story of Catherine and her twins and the fantastic work that our staff within the Welsh Ambulance Service has done on this remarkable incident. So this is a little bit of background just to set the scene. So the patient was pregnant with twins. So dichorionic diamniotic means we've got 2 twins, 2 sacs, 2 placentas, and booked with Cymru at 11 weeks gestation. So she had a routine community midwives appointments, and then during there she reported she had back pain. So she was then sent to maternity triage, which is appropriate, and she had a positive test which highlights that she was high risk for a preterm birth. She was then transferred to labour ward for review, and a plan was made to transfer to a unit with alongside neonatal unit. So this is a unit under Periprem Cymru that's more appropriate to give the care for the gestation that she was. So cots were identified, and then the in utero transfer was agreed. And the community midwife then arranged the transfer and was transferred to a level 1 unit. The transfer documentation was complete, and on review, all the care provided within Cymru was appropriate. She then remained admitted until the 24th of the 11th and was discharged home. So on the 24th of 11th, 2023, a call was made to triage within Cwmtaf, and the plan was then for her to attend hospital. Little did she know, 20 minutes later, her little baby's had a different plan. So a call was placed to 999, and she reported that she was in labour with twins of 29 plus 6 weeks. So resources were allocated very quickly, and the first paramedic was on scene at 16:52. They were then accompanied by another 6 resources. So we've got twins and mum, so we need as many people at scene. And they were also accompanied by MedServe, which is a volunteer community response car. So on that car was a
consultant anaesthetist and another paramedic.
Yeah, a consultant anaesthetist, and they sort of self-allocate, but EMIRTs weren't actually, they were already on a job, so they wasn't able to attend and support with this job, which is what they would normally do. Therefore, MedServe said that they would attend to give some support at scene. So 16:59, so very quick after, twin 1, which we now know is Anaira, was born. So she was born in very good condition. She had immediate skin to skin with her mum, which we all know the benefits of that. Hat and a blanket applied. So baby was placed into a plastic bag, which is the right thing for any babies under 32 weeks gestation, and wrapped in a towel with a heat pad to provide that thermal care. So we know that thermal care, every degree a baby loses below 36.5 increases their mortality rate. So thermal care is one of the most important things that we can be doing for these little babies. 17:32, we departed scene with twin 1. So the pre-alert was passed to the emergency department. So paramedic, for them, an ED department is where they know, it's where they feel comfortable going, it's where they know they're going to have direct access. They've got that recess where they can just go straight in. So that is always the preferred place where they feel comfortable going. So on conversation then within the ED department, they rang maternity and said, we've got this incident coming in. The neonatal team then positioned themselves within maternity, and it was a few conversations through a different departments on where was the best place for these babies to be going for the safest care. The decision was then made to attend maternity, and the maternity and neonatal staff were ready in the foyer. So the teams reported an efficient and effective transfer of care to the receiving team. So the second emergency ambulance arrived on scene at 17:28, and at 17:50, Catherine wasn't moving. She said, I can't move, I'm pushing, I need to have my second baby home. So all the will in the world, they could not get her to come to hospital to give birth to her second baby. So they then prepared the environment for twin 2. At this point, there was 22 people at scene. And again, so this baby come out breech. So now we've got twins. We've had one birth, that baby's gone to the hospital, and this baby is now coming out breech. So this is another emergency that our staff are dealing with. So again, this baby come out absolutely beautiful, had immediate skin to skin, which is imperative to this baby and the bonding for mum. Hat applied, baby covered with a towel and transferred to a plastic wrap. Wrapped in a towel, placed on a heat bag, and then got ready for transport. So at this point now, we've got 2 ambulances at scene. Baby's gone in one, and we've got another ambulance for mum and baby. So the team dynamically risk assessed at that point and said, let's put baby on the stretcher. Mum is well at the moment. Let's pop her in the seat and let's just get these patients to hospital. So just as they was about to pull off, the midwife arrived on scene, and mum started to have a postpartum hemorrhage. So they then had to get another resource to scene to be able to support Catherine. So baby was stable, receiving all the care they needed in the back, but another resource was needed to safely transport Catherine to hospital. That resource was quite quick, arriving on scene, and with a cross-border working between now, the midwife was dealing with a postpartum hemorrhage with a MedServe team. They then transferred mum to the hospital. So the third resource arrived on scene at 18:36. Twin two departed from scene. So I can imagine as soon as they got Catherine out of that first ambulance, they was going ready to take this baby to definitive care. And then just a minute later, Catherine was departed. So they arrived at Prince Charles at 1858 and 1859. On admission, both of these babies were normothermic, so they had normal temperatures, and that is absolutely incredible. And really, like, we can't praise the staff enough for getting those babies at that normal temperatures, because if we think about the mortality rate of these babies increasing with every degree they lose, these staff and Catherine with the skin to skin have given these babies the best start in life. So the babies were stabilised and then transferred to a level 1 unit the next day. So no more from me. So this is Catherine, Zenaida and Careg, and with the team that helped supported the birth of her baby. Catherine kindly recorded a little story. So from Catherine's perspective, this is her story.
That's Zenaida. That's Careg. I went into premature labour at 28 weeks. I was in hospital and they sent me home at 29 weeks. And I got in the house and 40 minutes later they were born. Well, she was born. 51 minutes he was, because he was breech. 12 paramedics, 2 air ambulance doctors and 2 midwives in the end. I think I had skin to skin with her first of all. And then they took her to wrap her up and give her oxygen masks. And then rushed her to Prince Charles while I was trying to give birth to Careg. But they were all great, all the crew were. And they were really calm, and it was scary, wasn't it? And my waters exploded. It was as if you push a balloon against the wall, it just went psh. But I do remember it all. Like, my concern was just, my focus was just on them. I started hemorrhaging and I had to have blood transfusions, so they split us up to different hospitals. Even though I was worrying and I was scared, you were all calm. They were down for neonatal in Newport, and then they went up to Caboo in Prince Charles until about 17th of January. But no, I was so grateful that they were there, because it could have been so different. No, and especially when the hospital sent me home and everything they done. But I remember when we were waiting for Careg to come out, she was like, "Yes," like a rugby ball. They went, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm going to catch him, I'm going to catch him." Because when they're little, they just come out super fast and they just come out, they just shoot different ways. So I do remember you were like, "Yes." Even though it's scary, like, but I think I like to make jokes of things when I'm scared. It makes it easier. Some of them have kept in touch with me as well and asked about the baby, so it wasn't just that day and then they just forgot about me either. I think people have checked up as well, and it's nice.
Yeah, so it must have been, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks before that we did the thermoregulation training. It hadn't long been rolled out, honestly. If I hadn't have done that training, there's so much that I really wouldn't have realised. And we didn't have the equipment on the truck at the time. We just improvised and we used the clinical waste bags and they worked, and we got them both there, and both their temperatures were absolutely fab. Every degree, I think they increases the mortality rate by 28%, is it? And other than that, we didn't really have to do any intervention. They were both really, really fit and healthy. Like, everything that they could have thrown at us, you know, multiple birth, breech. Kath ended up having postpartum hemorrhage, everything it could have thrown at us. And the outcome, well, look at them today. It's amazing. I'm really glad that she's actually, like, she's made the effort to come here and see us, and we've seen the twins again. It's incredible. It's emotional, actually. I think we've coached about 3 or 4 times. Kath's crying again.
If you lot didn't have our training, none of us might not be here, like, do you know what I mean?
I think it's important to note, while the service has, Welsh Ambulance Services invested a lot into the additional kit that's now on all our ambulances, the training that has to go alongside all that additional kit. This is an infrequent event for any paramedic. For everything that happened on this day, I can honestly say and absolutely guarantee for the crew and attendants that will be a once in a career incident. They will probably, you see the staff who were there, they were young. They've got a long career ahead of them. They'll probably never see this again to this extent. So for them to be able to turn up, react, utilize the training that they had been provided, but then to realize they didn't have the kit on their ambulance at that time, but then to compensate, to use a contaminated waste bag as a replacement for the maternal polythene bags that we now have on all our vehicles. You know, it was truly an impressive performance by our staff on that day. Based, you know, it's November 2023. The weather. So thermal regulation, you think, oh, well, you know, we put a blanket on them, keep them up. Babies lose their temperature really, really quickly, especially at this gestation period. For them to be able to arrive at hospital, normal thermic, you know, it's really impressive. It didn't used to happen. Sadly, it does today. From the training that we implemented, we had this instance within, what was it, about 6 weeks period? We had another twins, same gestation period, born in the Cumtab patch. And then we had a prolapse cord incident in the Cumtab area. 3 incidents in a short period of time, all of which are once in a career incidents. So, you know, the timing for us of doing the additional work we're doing around maternity, neonatal care, paid dividends in a very, very short period of time in the Cumtab area.
So we held a rapid review, as we do after any incidents that happen within the Cumtab region with the maternity and neonatal teams. And this reflects the strong working relationship that we do have with your teams in Cumtab. This enabled the timely identification of learning, like Mike said, with kit wasn't on the ambulances. That was something that we needed to react to and gain assurances that all of our ambulances and emergency vehicles had the kit on for the staff to be able to do the best job they can. One thing that we did note was a positive collaboration of the MDT between midwives and the paramedics at scene. So there's mandatory training for midwives, which is called Prompt Cymru, that is focusing on obstetric emergencies, and we are very privileged that in every community Prompt Wales course that is held now, paramedics also attend, so that allows that cross-border working relationship, which is just going from strength to strength and added, isn't it? Yeah. So the key learning points for us was the resource coordination. The presence of multiple patients necessitated the deployment of multiple resources and staff to coordinate effectively. So what we learned from this very quickly is that there was multiple conversations happening with multiple different wards, multiple different midwives on the same ward, and the staff in the Welsh Ambulance Service thought they were speaking to the same person every time. So that's where the communication sort of broke down. And this is the perfect case for us to learn from, because the outcome's absolutely fantastic. So the improvements that we implemented, we streamlined access and agreed protocols. And now in every Cumtab obstetric unit, there's a red phone. So similar to the red phones that some might know in the ED department, this phone is a dedicated line for the Welsh Ambulance Service. It goes to a single point within the obstetric unit so that the person answering that phone has the helicopter view, what is happening on the unit and what is being conveyed into them. With this, we've agreed processes and a system-led approach, and that's fine. We've covered that in next one. It's because I'm babbling.
She tells us that all the time.
So this is the obstetric phones on the and all the obstetric units within CTM. So we've actually gone one step further than other ambulance services with this. We looked at the data with all the heads of midwifery and realised that, like Mike said, these instances are low frequency but high acuity. So what can we do to progress that cross-border working relationship and give our staff the confidence to be dealing with these. So by every phone has got the JR Calc algorithm. So that's the scope of practice of the paramedic and the guidelines that they follow. So if a paramedic is at scene dealing with a maternity instance, they can also use this red phone for a midwife or a doctor to be giving them instructions over the phone on what they should be doing. That's it from us. Thank you for listening.
Thank you both. Thank you.
Thank you. Amazing.
It's a great question.
Any questions from board members to either Beth and Michael, or perhaps even to and Howard on the basis of what this is meant for us as an organisation as well in terms of how we work? Any? Carolyn and then Greg.
Just a comment, really. What really, well, everything struck me about that is a bit overwhelming, isn't it? Like, it's absolutely fantastic. But what I was really impressed with was how we've taken a lot of learning from something that actually went really well. And often it is when things go wrong, isn't it, that the communication and things like that come up. But to have actually taken all that learning and reflected on an incident where the outcome was so good is really impressive. And given the number of people involved in that, that must have been very difficult because it's a huge number of people to be involved in the review. But yeah,
I think what
absolutely amazing.
You know, what we have focused on with this is the care that's been provided by our staff when they arrive on scene. There was a step before that. So we had the 999 call, and one of the ladies that you saw in the video was actually one of our call takers who took the call, and the advice and support that she gave mum prior to the ambulance arriving was also you know, a contributory factor to everything that went well. Because what we generally find is if something's going to go wrong, it starts going wrong, and it's cascade effect. This job started well and it continued well. But that's not to say there wasn't learning, which the communication for us was the learning, multiple resources arriving on scene, coordinating those resources, because November 2023, this time of year it is, those resources are valuable. So to find that number of resources available to attend one incident with 3 patients was, you know, there's a lot of coordination involved in this. But as you said, it is really good to be able to take learning from a job that's gone well. And this is part of the debrief, particularly with this type of the job. We will have a debrief with the health board, not just with our staff, but with the health board, just to debrief ourselves, just to look what's gone well, what could have we done slightly different. And since then, we've implemented the red phones. We've got that coordination in place, not just in Clontarf, thanks to Beth. That's now Pan Wales that we've done this. So the benefits, you know, continue to come to fruition.
Great. Yeah, just picking up on Carolyn's points, I think learning from excellence as well as learning from error is something we're really trying to push across the health board. Great story, fantastic teamwork. Beth, my question was around your particular role because it's still kind of newish, and so we don't have midwives, or midwives aren't often associated to ambulance trusts, and Beth has prevented many admissions going into our obstetric units by supporting women from a triage perspective. So Beth, thank you for everything that you've been doing to support our local women in the community, because I know, you know, I've seen the data of late that, you know, the work that you're doing is incredible. So thank you for that, Beth.
Thank you.
I just add on to your comment there, Greg, because we can't underestimate the value of having a midwife working with West and bridging that sort of gap. We have very skilled colleagues working in Welsh Ambulance, and the work they do is amazing. But having that vet and a midwife as a conduit between the services has really sort of helped us collaborate and communicate a lot more efficiently in a more timely way. And I think we can see a difference, what you were talking about, Mike, over the years in how these maternity and neonatal cases are cared for in the community. The change is absolutely vast. And, you know, there's so much work has happened over recent years to make sure our policies are aligned. We have those quick, timely, rapid review conversations. And it is literally picking a phone now and having those conversations, where previously it was a little bit more logistically different. Yeah. So you know, the way things are changing, the MDT training, for emergencies with the midwives and the paramedics together in the community, the red phone, it's just made a huge difference. And it's lovely to see that those several emergencies that happened in that situation, like I said, everything was there, but it wasn't just the outcome in terms of they were all well. It was the experience. You could feel that woman, despite everything that happened there, she felt supported and safe, and she is not emotionally damaged from being in really what could have been a very different and traumatic situation. So
I think what Beth hasn't mentioned is that there's a convent with Welsh Ambulance Service, which is funded centrally, comes to an end next week. But the good news is the Welsh Ambulance Service has identified the role she's played within the service. So Beth's got an interview for a job next week.
Patsy, thank you.
yeah, thanks.
Thanks for having us.
My question is around, you said at one point there were 22 people on site. Who's in charge? How do you know who's in charge?
So this is part of the work that we've been doing since 2018. You know, we used to have a role within the ambulance service, which you probably remember as clinical team leader, CTL. We've done away with that role, and we've split the role into what we call a duty operation manager. And you saw the one lady who was a duty operation manager, and we also have senior paramedic. So it's one's clinical, one is managerial. So at this type of incident, the DOM would go there to coordinate resources, their scene management. The senior paramedic would be for the clinical leadership. So, you know, we've done an awful lot of work over the last 7 years around clinical leadership. We've now got teams in place to support all our clinicians at the coalface, either at an incident or at station levels. So there is always somebody there for them to be able to get that supervision and clinical support, which, you know, from a health board perspective, working within a hospital environment, you probably take that for granted. But for a service such as ours, which is dynamic, it works 24/7, quite often with single crew stations, crews working in isolation, to provide that level of leadership isn't always easy, but we now have the teams in place to be able to do that. So yeah, 22 people coming through at different times. They didn't all turn up together, but being able to coordinate that both from a control room perspective and the on-scene perspective, we do now have teams in place to be able to support that.
Okay. Any other questions from board members? Mike, thank you very much. Beth, thank you very much indeed. Absolutely fantastic to see you this morning, and thanks for talking us through what has been an incredible story, very incredible journey. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Great.
Okay, we'll move on to item 3.2, and this is a report that Howell is bringing to the board this morning. It's a report with a range of options and a recommendation in respect of shift patterns. Just to say to the board, the item is being presented for approval. So I'm going to ask Howell to present the report, and then obviously invite members to raise any questions or any particular points in respect of what has been set out. Thank you, Howell.
So it's okay. I just wanted to provide a bit of background before I get into the report itself. And just to say, I'll probably go through this in a little bit of detail, if that's okay, because I think that's important. So many of you will know, obviously, the former CT ceased to exist on 1st of April 2019 with the Bridgend boundary change, when the County Borough of Bridgend became part of the responsibility of the newly formed Cwm Tafon Organic Health Board. As part of that transfer we received across around 4,000 staff via a 2P transfer, many, but not all of whom had a different shift pattern to the staff that exist across the former CT footprint. So predominantly Prince Charles Hospital, the Glam, and indeed the community hospitals. And I'll go through the differences between the shift patterns in a little bit. Initially, that came across relatively quietly, but I think in 2020, probably around about the middle of 2020, we started to receive some contact from staff at POW raising the issue that we had an inconsistent set of shift patterns across the health board. Now, at that time, for reasons that are probably obvious in hindsight, because we were right in the middle of the pandemic, and we were particularly harshly hit by the pandemic in this particular area in this health board, we made the decision not to harmonise shift patterns at that point, which I think was the right decision at the time. We also had some grievances from staff in relation to that, which we dealt with at the time. Time moved on, and I think it's become more and more clear to us as a health board over the last couple of years that this is something we needed to look at and something we needed to address for a number of reasons, really. Some of which relate to the desire from staff to have a consistent shift pattern across the health board, but also from a health board perspective, given our ambitions and some of our plans, having inconsistent and different shift patterns across the health board, we believe is unsustainable. And I think that's probably been evident through the experience that we've had with the roof critical incident at POW and some of the operational challenges that has been presented by having a variety of staff on different shift patterns. So earlier on this year, my team, working with nursing teams, kicked off a piece of work, which was a partnership piece of work. We'd done a piece of work last year, which was a bit of an evidence review, which was a really thorough piece of work, taking a look at the best available evidence in relation to a variety of different shift patterns, not just the two shift patterns that exist in Bridgend and the rest of the CTM patch. We took that evidence review into a broader piece of work and designed that with trade union colleagues. So we were really clear that that was an engagement piece of work, so not a formal consultation. I'll come back to that point later on. So that piece of work that we did with TU colleagues at that point was really an engagement on options. We tried to be as broad as we could about that, so that this was really about what's the right shift pattern for CTM, rather than a slightly more binary exercise about is it the POW shift pattern or is it the other former CT shift pattern. So that came up with a number of options, which I'll run through shortly. Just a couple of other things to say as part of that work as well. We also shared a survey with staff, which we had a pretty good response rate to. So around about 1,500, I think, responses. We agreed the questions for that survey, again, in partnership with trade union colleagues. And again, we weren't as binary as saying which of these would you want to go for. But we were really clear to ask questions which gave us a picture of what worked and what didn't work. And again, when I go through the different options we considered, I'll also just touch on some of what came through from that survey results. And of course, we've, when considering what we design, have had to have an eye to our legal obligations in terms of rests within long shifts, in particular, and obviously things like the working time directive. So I'll just jump into the options, if that's all right, and then I'll just be really clear about exactly what we're asking the board to do today in the context of what will follow in terms of consultation, depending on the board decision. So, as I mentioned, literature review was undertaken, and you will have that included in your papers at Appendix 1, so you can see it's a pretty thorough literature review. Just want to be really clear about the evidence base. So what we're not saying here is that the option we're proposing is indisputably what the evidence tells us. As with any academic literature, there's an element of judgment, and we've made a judgment on a number of factors, which I'll come on to shortly. So there will be people who will read that evidence and interpret it inevitably in a different way. But the four things that we've tried to balance are quality and safety, and of course, staff well-being, financial efficiency, and then availability of workforce. So those are the four things that we have tried to balance. We've been really open that all four of those things are part of our thinking. And I think hopefully the paper and the data within it shows the balance of considerations of all of those things. So essentially the four options that we looked at were a do nothing option, five options, sorry, were a do nothing option. And for the reasons that I've already articulated, we didn't believe that that was something that we could do in the circumstances. The second option was that of a 12.5-hour shift with an unpaid 60-minute break, either to be taken in one or by two 30-minute breaks, which is known as the POW option, essentially. The third option, which is a 12.5-hour shift with an unpaid 30-minute break, which is consistent with what we call the former CT shift pattern options. We also then looked at an early shift 8 hours with an unpaid 30-minute break, a late shift 8 hours with a 30-minute unpaid break, and a night shift of 10 hours with a 30-minute unpaid break. And then lastly, we looked at a 12-hour shift with an unpaid 45-minute break. So appreciate this. That's quite difficult to wrap your head around, but I would assume you've had the paper and that you will have read through those options. So I think there's a couple of things to say about long shifts in general. So, you know, long shifts are generally the preference of our workforce. So people prefer to work their days over 3 days rather than to come to work for 5 days and work, for example, 8 hours. Generally, that is a preference that exists across our workforce. People generally in the feedback say that that allows them to manage their outside of work challenges more effectively. And that is a fairly common shift pattern across healthcare in the UK. However, with longer shifts, there are some issues, particularly around fatigue, as you'd expect if you're in work for longer and you're working a longer shift, that can impact fatigue and therefore can impact on things like errors, those types of things. One of the mechanisms the evidence suggests to mitigate both of those things, and it's a fairly logical proposition, is increased breaks. So clearly, if you're working for longer, taking regular breaks is a good thing to do because it enables you to step away from your work and take a break, and also then to recharge, rehydrate, all of those things. The evidence suggests that that's a good thing. From a well-being perspective, I think generally 12-hour shifts with extended breaks do have an impact on well-being. Breaks themselves are the way to mitigate that. And of course, that's what the European Working Time Directive is for, is to ensure that when people are working long shifts, they take the right breaks. We also looked at the evidence for shorter shifts, and like I said, there's a preference issue there. There are issues in terms of shorter shifts also with quality and safety, particularly around handover. So there are benefits for patient safety, but there are also issues around multiple handovers and multiple start and finish times and the impact that that can have. So I think it's probably fair to say from a quality and safety perspective that there are swings and roundabouts in relation to the different shift patterns. But what does seem clear is that when you're working longer shifts, taking breaks to mitigate any concerns around errors and fatigue and indeed well-being is a good thing to do. As I mentioned already, from a work-life balance perspective, 12.5-hour shifts are the preference generally of our workforce. And with shorter shifts, that will impact on people's ability to cover childcare arrangements and those types of things. So I think from a well-being perspective, we also considered that given the preference, longer shifts seem to be the better option. Touching on the financial assessment then, if you look at page 7 of the report, which starts to articulate option 2, so the 12.5-hour shift with a 60-minute break, which is the POW shift pattern, would effectively yield a financial efficiency of around about 5 million per annum. And from a workforce availability perspective, would effectively mean that we would require an estimated 105 full-time equivalent fewer nurse and midwifery registered and HCA staff. Now, what that doesn't mean is that we're going to be reducing the number of nurses that work for us or HCAs that work for us. We know that we've got significant turnover in both of those staff groups, and we know that currently supply that comes into us via student streamlining and other routes doesn't quite meet the demand that we have. So we have opportunities to manage that via turnover effectively. If you look at option 3, which is the current CT shift pattern, if we were to choose that option and roll that option out across the health board, that would result in an increased cost of around about 1.4 to 1.7 million, and would mean that we would require an additional 29 full-time equivalents. If you then look at option 4, which is effectively shorter shifts, that would increase cost by an estimated 9 million and mean that we would require an estimated 257 full-time equivalents. So a very significant increase in full-time equivalents. And then the last option we looked at was the 12.5-hour shift with an unpaid 45-minute break, which is, if you like, the in-between option, which would cost in the region of 1.8 million and would require 38 full-time equivalent fewer posts. So effectively, our determination was that, given what we've heard from staff via the survey that we designed in partnership with trade unions, we believe that there is a clear preference for longer shifts for the reasons that I've mentioned previously. The evidence in relation to quality and safety and well-being suggests that any issues with longer shifts can be mitigated effectively with longer breaks. And in any event, when we thought about the current breaks available, we frankly felt that a half-an-hour break for a 12.5-hour shift didn't feel appropriate or long enough, frankly. Now, one of the things we had back very clearly through this exercise is, well, hang on a minute, we can't take our breaks now. So you're proposing potentially to increase our breaks by half an hour, and that's a really fair point. The slight irony to the lengthy breaks, the more lengthy breaks option, so the additional half-an-hour breaks, is actually it gives us more availability of workforce. So because what we would be asking people to do is increase their makeup shift from 6 hours to 12 hours, that enables us to cover more of our shifts and have more availability of workforce, which we hope and we think in turn would allow us to more effectively enable people to take their breaks in the first place. So that sounds slightly counterintuitive, but actually that does give us a greater availability and ability to cover shifts across the health board. So for that reason, and then also the financial efficiency reasons and the workforce availability reasons, we are recommending the option 2. Just go back up to make sure I'm right. Yeah, option 2, which is the 12.5 hours unpaid 60-minute break option. Just in relation to the 45-minute break option, we did give that some good consideration. I think some of the issues that probably prevented us from recommending that were around operational feasibility of implementation, and also again, back to the issue of length of breaks, we also felt that 45 minutes probably wasn't quite enough in terms of what we want people to take as a break in a 12.5-hour shift. And as I mentioned earlier, the reasons around financial efficiency and workforce availability. So I'll just pause there, if that's all right, before I come on to what I'm recommending and what that's subject to, if that's okay. And of course, welcome any other exec colleagues who may wish to come in at that point.
Thank you, Howell. That's a very comprehensive explanation. And firstly, can I just, before I bring Patsy in, I say thank you for the detail that you've included in the main paper, but also the appendices which accompanied it, to set out the range of consideration that you and Tim have gone through. Patsy, thank you.
Yeah, two questions from me. It talks here, and I can't see it immediately, about a perceived pay differential on the part of POW staff. Surely we can prove to people that there is no pay disadvantage in what essentially, if this is agreed, is moving towards. Because if the POW staff feel that, then the whole of the nursing staff are going to feel that if they believe there is evidence to it. And so my first question is, how can that be proved in such a way that the staff actually understand that is fact? And secondly, what's the likely reaction and impact? Not so much impact, you talked about that, but what's the likely reaction going to be to this?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Patsy. So pay-wise, I think we've looked at this all possible ways. So we can't find any information that suggests there is a pay differential as a result of these shift patterns. So effectively what we're asking people to do is take a second half an hour unpaid break, and then to effectively once a month increase their 6-hour makeup shift to a 12.5-hour makeup shift in order to address that. So what we're effectively doing is asking people to work their hours, but in a different way. It is a shift pattern that is used in Swansea Bay Health Board, for example, of course, because we transferred these staff from the former Abertawe Bromoganu Health Board. And there is, as far as we are concerned, there is no differential in pay. We've looked at that lots of times. We've had finance colleagues help us to take a look at that as well. And we've tried to explain that as clearly as we possibly can to staff. Now, the perception among staff, which I also understand, is, well, you're asking me to take another unpaid break as part of my shift, therefore you must be paying me less. But it's the makeup shift that's the important thing there in terms of bringing that back up to the normal level of pay and the hours worked for the month.
Do they get paid for the makeup shift?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So that brings it up to normal hours and a normal level of pay. And there is a principle in A4C for unpaid breaks. So that is a well-established principle. You know, all of us in this room will work, if you like, normal office hours, have a unpaid break baked into our hours of work. In terms of reaction, so I think, let's be honest, this is going to be a really tricky thing to do. So I think there will be people who are expecting us to go the other way on this. And we know that this is going to be a very, very tricky thing to navigate with our workforce. So I don't want people to be under any illusions about that. This will be a very, very difficult change to navigate. What we've tried to do here, I think, is recommend what we think is the right decision. It certainly isn't the easy decision, which is why I think how we do this, as well as the decision we make, is, if not as important, as more important, actually. And subject to the decision the board makes today, the first thing we will be doing is obviously communicating with our workforce, but then designing the best possible change process that we can with trade union colleagues, but also with a variety of leaders across the organisation to make sure we get there. But it's going to be tricky.
Thanks, John. Hey.
Thanks, John. I suppose in response from trade union perspective to you, Patsy, yes, I agree. The initial conflict, I suppose, came up about that sort of perception that pay wasn't equitable, but actually that's completely gone now. That's not being talked about at all within staff in the workforce. It is the shift patterns and the harmonisation, and it's not to say that staff are against harmonisation, they do welcome it. It's more the options that have been recommended that they're not happy with. Purely looking at their sort of well-being, their work-life balance, asking, the majority to change for a minority. Not that it is us versus them, like Howell said, but that can be how it's perceived. I guess in response to how do we think this is going to be received and responded to, I know that the RCN in particular have had lots of calls already through their central trade union raising concerns about this and the fact that they kind of perceive it's already a done deal because it's financially appealing to the board. So that's going on. There's also activity within the workforce for petitions already going around, and plans that trade unions will be putting in sort of formal dispute and invoking the right for status quo until that dispute and those grievances have been fully resolved. That's probably as much as I can kind of really say in response to that at the moment.
Let's just bring Paul in before I come to Geraint.
Just bring your person on.
Okay, Geraint.
Oh, my question is largely answered about the response of the trade unions. I suppose I just follow on from what you just said then. I mean, how comfortably are we that we should proceed with this when there is perhaps still some doubt?
Doubt in respect
of the workforce through their trade union.
No,
I'm not only asked a question.
Yeah. So just contextualise, I guess. We've known for a long time this situation is inequitable in the way in which the workforce hours are being allocated. So we have to address that. We can't continue in a situation where we've got disparity of workforce in different places having different shift patterns. And I suppose in some ways, since the POW issues at the end of last year and the moves we've made around moving people around, it's become ever more evident that we have, literally wards up in the Royal Glam where one ward is ex-POW or seconded POW people over from POW who are working on one shift pattern, and down the corridor is a different ward with old RDH staff who are working a different, and that isn't equitable for anybody. It causes complications then when people want to move between teams or shift jobs between teams or departments. And you look at the way we are going in terms of trying to move services around across our health board, it is a massive challenge in terms of how we manage this. So we have to address this. Right? To answer again the question, we can't sustain this any longer in terms of not allowing this pattern to continue. The question then is, what is the optimal way? And I think this isn't something we've rushed into. This is not something we've just said, oh well, it's just easy, isn't it? We just move to that model or that model. We've done a huge amount of work to try and get underneath what the drivers are, what the issues are, what the evidence tells us, what we know are the opportunities. And candidly, I think, we have to make a decision. And just to be really clear, this is not about the money. This is about making sure that we have equitable models of rotas across our organisation. There's a separate question, I think, about this is obviously focused around the nursing rotas. There's follow-up questions which we need to then consider about other staff groups, because we know equally in other staff groups we've probably got similar types of challenges between different services that are operating on different rotas. So I think it's really important also that we don't say this is just about the focus on nursing, but the reality is the nursing workforce is our biggest workforce, and it's where the disparity of rotas is the most evident between our services. So it's not to say that we are focusing just on nursing because that's the only end. We will, I think, in time need to look at other areas. I think Hal mentioned this, and I think it is a really important point of it. It's how we do this in a collaborative way with staff, recognising that it's not going to be an easy conversation. But I also think it's really important that we also describe what this will mean in practice for a nurse. So if I'm a Band 5 nurse working in the Royal Glamorgan, today I work this model, so I work 3 days and I have 4 days off, and I do a makeup of X. And in the future, I work 3 days, have 4 days off, but once a month I have to do X amount more or whatever. Because I think there's something about really trying to explain it in a very clear and straightforward way, because there's quite a lot of nuances and complexities in this.
And I think that we're going to need to think carefully about how we sit and explain this to staff and what method of communicating this is to staff, and listen to concerns and issues. But I think it's also about recognising that we've got a duty to make sure that we're able to have enough staff to provide the care to our patients. And we all know some of the challenges we have around vacancies and continually trying to look at how we fill those vacancies. This proposal makes a significant impact on our nursing vacancies, which is really, really important to remember. 100 vacancies will be resolved by reorganising this model. That's 100 vacancies that otherwise we might need to go out to bank or agency for, or we might need to find temporary arrangements to cover. So that is a big factor we need to remember, because continually, having lots of vacancies is not good for anybody and causes even more pressure on the well-being of the existing staff. So it's really important to remember, I think, the well-being linked to vacancy management. And the financial question, I read, some of the feedback from colleagues is, this is about a financial decision. This is not just about a financial decision. This is about, as a board and as an organisation, looking at how we provide safe care within the resources available to us. And I don't think we can be, we can't avoid the point that this option does produce a financial efficiency. I don't think we can be embarrassed about saying that. It is a reality, and we are an organisation that is facing significant challenges financially, like everybody else in the NHS. So we have a duty as an organisation to make sure that we're making the best use of the resources we have available to us, and that includes having to sometimes make difficult decisions, that as making sure that we balance that against the risk and the safety and the quality aspect. But it is about looking at in the round, and I think this paper does a very good job of trying to present all of that in the round and come to a consensus view at the end of it, which is the proposal that's being put forward as the preferred option.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Chair. So I am supportive of the recommendation for how articulated it is. Probably worth mentioning that this doesn't affect district nurses and community psychiatric nurses. So they currently work a 5-day shift patterns. It's just the acutes and the community hospitals, including the mental health wards, but not the community teams. I guess one unintended consequence could be a reduction in mandatory and statutory training, because the 6-hour makeup shift, the old part of CTM, is generally rostered for staff to undertake stat and man training. Generally, sometimes nurses will come in and work a half a shift, but it's kind of the only way, really, to some extent, specifically with some of the other challenges we've got with staffing, which of course this would mitigate, for the staff to actually get the stat and man training. So we need to keep an eye on that. From an agency perspective, we do know we have evidence that there is an increase in error rate, particularly medication errors with some of our agency nurses. So from a safety perspective, that will mitigate that right down, the fact that we'll be reducing our reliance on agency. But as Howell mentioned, this, I've had lots of conversations with trade union colleagues and nursing colleagues over the last couple of weeks. And I think if the board does make this decision, then we really need to be on point with the change process, the way that we negotiate and have those helpful, respectful discussions with staff and trade unions. It's going to cause a lot of noise. But if you look at the evidence within Howell's paper, obviously the safest shift is the short shift. And of course, we're not recommending that to the board. If staff don't want to work safe shifts, the less risky option then is the 12.5-hour shift with 2 breaks. So I'm supportive, bearing in mind what I mentioned around some of the unintended consequences, but I think this will be really tricky and the board really needs to make the right decision.
Thank you, Greg. Any other questions? Thank you.
It's not a question really, Jonathan, it's just to say that I think this paper is excellent. It's one of the best papers as a board that we've had since I've been an independent member, and I thank Howell and his team and everyone who's inputted into it. It's really well considered. It's not something that's been brought to us in a rush. I support the proposal. What I would ask for is that as independent members, we are kept updated about the engagement process and the change that happens around this, because I think it's important that we're assured that staff are content with how the process is proceeding, But yeah, I fully support this, and thank you, Helen. Thank you for your explanation as well. It's excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Neil.
Thank you. Again, it was going to be one of my comments. I thought it was an incredibly well balanced report, with both sides of the argument forward. I think it was very, very constructive. So, really welcome that. I think the importance of safety and the importance of wellness of staff as well, I think is really, really important. One of the concerns that you raised in the report is the ability for staff to take breaks, and of course, we're asking staff to take more breaks. Yes. So, have you thought through what mechanisms and structures and processes we can put in place to help staff to be able to do that? And I understand the piece about there'll be additional staff available, so that should, in principle, enable that to happen. But how can you find a mechanism which makes sure that people do take the breaks that they are entitled to?
So absolutely. So I genuinely think, both logically and otherwise, that the increased breaks and the increased availability of staff that would give us will enable people better to take their breaks. However, I think that, to me, needs to be a massive part of the consultation exercise that we now go through. For me, people have told us someday we can't take our breaks at the moment. So if we're going to be making this decision and effectively asking them to take more, we need to put really good systems in place to enable them to do that. And I think for me, that's a massive part now of what happens next. That would be a key priority of that exercise, will be to make sure we've got the systems in place to ensure that happens.
Hey.
Yeah, I'd probably extend that to sort of toil as well, where we know that lots of staff work an extra 15 minutes, 20 minutes, half an hour on top of their break unpaid. And over the course of the year, that's going to be quite substantial if they're not remunerated for it or have that time back. And essentially, we haven't gone out to staff to ask their opinion, but my gut's kind of saying they'd rather have the time back rather than the money. And then how we're going to factor that in if we're then having to put toil within a rotoring system as well. Yeah, that would be my
Thank you, Harold. Before I come to the recommendation that's been put to the board, can I again just re-emphasise and I suppose re-articulate the point that colleagues have made about the level of detail that's been included in the report. Yeah, the judgment that's been put in based on the availability of evidence, the consultation that's taken place, the way in which the different options have been explored, and it is a brutal assessment and a very honest assessment of the challenges and opportunities of trying to get that consistency across our organisation. And I fully appreciate the challenges of attempting to do this, particularly so many years after Bridgend came into the old CT, but obviously with the pandemic at that point, as Harold rightly pointed out, it would have been almost unthinkable to have gone through this sort of process at that point. And I know that this has been a well thought out process that you and the team have gone through in order to get to a point at which there are a series of options from which a recommendation has been made to the board. And I also say I appreciate with the detail you put into the next steps, particularly around a draft implementation plan and the sorts of things now that you and the team will need to consider over the next few months. One thing I haven't had a chance to mention this to you, but I what would be helpful, I think, to the board is that we have perhaps a quick update note on progress at the board meeting at the end of July. And also probably one at the end of September as well. So we ensure the board remains focused on how this is developing, how the conversations are taking place with trade union colleagues and staff, and in terms of those key aspects of the implementation of this, just to ensure that things are as on track as they can be. Paul, do you want to come back to this one?
Yeah, no, I'm absolutely agreeing in terms of regular update. I guess how the quick question I was going to ask about the consultation itself. So, because clearly there's a consultation on the process and the model across the organisation, but obviously every individual member of staff will have different circumstances they're juggling and managing. So, what level of consultation will that literally be a conversation with every member of staff about what this will mean for you, or potentially?
Yeah. So it'll very much depend on individual circumstances. Yeah. So of course, people have very specific personal circumstances that mean this will be difficult for for them. We will work with individuals to do that. So yeah, there will be an extensive consultation on the detail of it. Just to say really clearly, I know you're going to probably read these out, Jonathan, but just to be really clear with the board, what we're doing today is making this decision in principle subject to that consultation. Just want to be really clear on that. So there is a process to go through there. But yeah, very happy to provide regular updates to the board on that.
And I also think through that process of consultation, in an opportunity to talk about rest and breaks, and what's are there, because we know that it varies. There are some wards which are very good at enabling all their staff to take breaks, and there are others that are less so. So there's something about how do we use this opportunity to also focus in on, well, actually, how do we make sure those people can take breaks, and also what facilities are we providing for people to take breaks? Because that's another thing that comes up as a bit of a challenge sometimes is, well, where can I have a break? We don't have a staff room, or we don't have a rest room in our area. So there's something about also using it in that broader sense around the wellbeing agenda about how can we make sure that breaks are able to be taken, and do we provide the right types of facilities for people to take breaks? But I think it's also about recognising the wellbeing is an important part of this agenda.
Thank you. As chair, I'm supportive of the option that's being put to the board this morning. Harold is right that you have to try and look at this through a balance of judgment and evidence and information in front of us. Is it right that we have a consistent working pattern? It is. We're one organisation. I know that's something that we need to reflect on for other staff groups as well. But we see this as Cwmtaf Morgannwg. We don't see this as Cwmtaf with Bridgend added in. This is a whole organisation where we're trying to ensure that we treat staff fairly across the entirety of the organisation. So I think, from my perspective, the judgment on this is right. But of course, the board will want to be assured as we go through this process of consultation that we are doing everything in the right way, as I'm sure we will be. And again, thank you for setting out the next steps. That was incredibly helpful. Just to give the assurance about the amount of work that will be done following the board consideration today. So on that basis, can I propose to the board that we adopt option 2 as set out by Howell in principle, subject to formal consultation?
There are two specific decisions, Chair, if it's okay, that we're asking for that, and also endorse the decision that we appoint new staff onto the shift pattern outlined in option 2.
Again, it's clear. Thank you. All those in favour? Thank you. Anybody against? Thank you, Haley. Okay, one against. Okay, that carries. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, Alan. Okay, we'll move on to item 4.1, the chair's report and the affixing of the common seal. Just a couple of matters to raise in my report, which you will have read. A couple of big strategic pieces that have taken place in the past couple of months. You will be aware that the Cabinet Secretary for Health and Social Care outlined his priorities for this 12-month period running up until around the end of March, April of next year. And that did gain a fair bit of press coverage at the time. A few weeks later, we had the launch of the Ministerial Advisory Group on productivity and efficiency within 4 areas of NHS services. That was chaired by Sir David Sloman. So we've had 2 substantive and strategic pieces of work undertaken. I know that we as a health board will be considering the Ministerial Advisory Group recommendations to see where we are already advancing some of the things that have been included in that and where perhaps further work can be done. As I understand it, both obviously the Cabinet Secretary and his officials have been considering what that plan will look like for this year. So we are waiting to hear further, I think, from Welsh Government as to what this means for the NHS in terms of both his priorities and those key elements within the Ministerial Advisory Group report. The second bit beyond that is you will be aware, because we've already discussed it, the Cabinet Secretary has issued a direction to the chairs and chief execs of the 3 health boards that we should establish a South East Wales Regional Committee to more formally bring together that existing partnership working, those relationships that have developed over many years into one place. It's intended that some of the conversations around County Trust and Health Park will feed into that work, and also the enormity and the depth of the work that's already done in a number of work programmes regionally will also form part of the work of the South East Wales Regional Committee. So there is a paper further on in today's agenda from me that covers that off, so I won't go into detail now. We'll leave that bit until a bit later, but that's an important development because there is a close working relationship between the three health boards, and clearly the Cabinet Secretary was of the view that formalising that in a South East Wales Regional Committee was a way to perhaps put a bit more momentum, a bit more shape around some of those regional discussions. The final point for me is around performance improvement generally. And Gethin, I would like to formally place on record my thanks, and hopefully the thanks of the entire board, not just to you and the team, but the entirety of our workforce, for the work that has been done to address the 2-year waiting time target that we were expecting to meet by the end of March. And despite what BBC Wales said last week, if you look at the enormous shift in the numbers of people waiting over the past few months for treatment at that 2-year point, there has been an enormous amount of improvement, not just here in CTM, but across the whole of Wales. And that is a testament to the exquisite, quite frankly, planning arrangements that you and the team put in place in order to address that particular challenge, but the work that our staff have put in to ensuring that we were able to treat people as quickly as possible. And again, having had a very successful visit by the Cabinet Secretary last week to the new County Trust and Health Park, it was clear, I think, to him and everybody else on that visit, the importance around building that additional capacity to meet the demand that we face today, but also to future-proof our services to meet the demands of the future. So Gethin, I know huge performance improvement here. It's fantastic to see it, and I know we've got ambition for this year as well. But I just want to place on record my thanks and thanks to the board, but for all of the work that's been done to get us to that point. And it's great for patients, great for their families, and good to know that we've been pulling together in order to achieve that. So those are the key points I wanted to flag out of my report. Before I ask for the approval of the board in terms of the use of the common seal and the ratification of the chair's urgent action, any questions on the key points in my report? Hayley.
I was just going to ask about, because you've updated about our associate members, and I was just wondering where we were with progress on the associate member for primary care. Discussed that previously, I think.
Yeah. So conscious Gareth's not with us today, but we've tasked Gareth with pulling together a process that we can work through to identify a general practitioner to join the board. We have had the clearance from Welsh Government to move to the appointment or the recommendation of the appointment of an associate member, as the board is allowed 4 associate members, and obviously we have 3 excellent associate members, but obviously with the work that Paul is chairing with the team on the new primary care plan, we will hopefully get that as quickly as we can. So I'm sure we'll get an update from Gareth once he returns from his holiday. Perhaps we can share that with board members when he's back.
Yeah. And I think the one thing to say here is there isn't a precedent for it, so I think Gareth's having to look at what that remit would look like and how we would do it. So we're sort of setting the sort of stall for it really. So it is taking a bit longer than we would need. So
thank you.
Thanks, Ellie. If there are no other questions, can I just ask the board to endorse the fixing of the common seal and to ratify the chair's urgent action that is described towards the end of the report? Thank you all very much. Thank you. Okay. Just to move to item 4.2, the Chief Exec's report. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks, Chair. So just to brief you on a couple of things. So we had recently our JET meeting, our joint executive meeting in Welsh Government, which was an opportunity to go through the outcomes at the end of last year, and also to talk about where we are this year in terms of our performance relating to enhanced monitoring in a number of areas. You'll see there the summary of where we are on the escalation framework with Welsh Government at the moment, as well as the ambitions and the expectations from Welsh Government about how we can be de-escalated. So that's framing very much our approach to our targeted efforts in particularly some of the planned care areas, but also some of the emergency care measures that we're looking to try and further improve on, and further work being done at the moment on how we might move forward more quickly on some of those urgent care measures as well. As you said, John, there's been a lot of work nationally around the Ministerial Advisory Group and a number of recommendations. I think it's 29 recommendations that came out in that report, which is in my report. We are doing a bit of work which Gareth is helping coordinate, because we've had quite a few national reports or get-togethers recently from the Cabinet Secretary's priorities, the Ministerial Advisory Group. We've had a Wigan Summit, we've had a digital summit. There's quite a lot of activity going on nationally, and there's something about how do we make sure that we're assessing against particularly the MAG and the Cabinet Secretary priorities where we are on those measures, because I think a lot of work is going on in the space, particularly if you look at the Ministerial Advisory Group. There's a lot of work that Gethin and colleagues are leading operationally on some of those things. It's about just, I think it would be useful for us as a board just to keep tabs on that on an ongoing basis. And maybe we think, we've Gethin touched on this, maybe we might build this into some of our inward performance reporting. We might want to start to bring some of it into our performance reporting, just so we can share with you. I think there is an expectation from government, particularly, that boards are keeping an oversight of the recommendations in their own organisation and what they're doing to drive up the productivity and efficiency in that area. So we'll work on that for a future board meeting. Also, I mentioned there in my report about the work that's going on at MySteg. We obviously had a briefing session with yourselves a while back on the MySteg opportunities. We had a series of engagement events a few weeks ago with both staff at MySteg Hospital, local authority councillors in the Llymphy Valley, and also the League of Friends at MySteg, to share with them where we are at in our work on thinking through what the options could be for MySteg Hospital. Also looking at whether the resources that are available to us can deliver everything that we would like to deliver on the hospital site, or whether an alternative provision in a facility that is in a new site would be a more cost-effective way to deliver the overall ambitions that we have for the programme. That conversation was shared in terms of in the spirit of being open and transparent with our stakeholders. I think it's fair to say, as we expected, there was a range of perspectives. Some people can absolutely see the rationale for why you would look at an alternative. Others obviously quite concerned about what that would mean for the hospital. So we were very transparent that this was just an options appraisal. No decisions have been made. Further work is ongoing at the moment with the contractors to sort of evaluate what alternative options could bring for the resources available at the moment. And we will then need to pursue further conversations with the council in Regend about that. But I think we will get to a point later on this summer where those options will be fully costed and worked through from the contractor, and they'll be brought back obviously to the board for a conversation then about how we explore those options further. Bearing in mind that the resource we have available is coming through a particular funding stream linked through the RPB, and there isn't any extra funding beyond that. So it's about how we can deliver the services that we want to deliver for the population in Llymphy Valley within the resource envelope that's available to us. So further work, once we've got the detailed feedback from the contractor, we will bring back to this group. Just to finish as well, to say that Stuart and I went to a digital summit that Welsh Government held a couple of weeks ago. So Sarah Murphy, the Minister of Mental Health and Wellbeing, also has the lead role for digital in the healthcare area. We were asked to talk about the work we're doing on the mental health electronic record with Betsy Cadwallader. So did a joint presentation there, which was very positively received. The Minister was very happy that progress is being made in that area. And she also outlined highlighted her priorities for digital for the next 12 months, which you'll see there. And I think it's reassuring in a way that pretty much all of those things that we're responsible are very much on our radar and in our plans for how we develop our digital services going forward. But it's clear that there's an ever increasing priority being placed on the digital agenda within Welsh Government. And that after the summit, there was also a newly established digital leadership group, which involves Chief Executives, Welsh Government and DHEW, which is now going to be the place where decision making around digital investment and strategy is all made together between the NHS, Welsh Government and DHEW, which I think will be helpful in terms of just providing a joined up approach to the digital agenda moving forward. So those are all the points John I wanted to bring.
Thanks, Paul. Any questions to Paul on his report? Haley.
Sorry, me again. It was just around the 2.3 Paul. I know that with the CAPSEC priorities, and I know that we've been speaking loads about primary care and community services, and it'd just be nice maybe in the future board or meeting that we could maybe have a bit of an update around enhanced community care and what's going on in the primary. Is that okay?
Yeah, no, that'd be really helpful, Haley, and good suggestion. I think there's a lot of things going on at the moment in that area, so it'd be useful to be able to bring an update. We'll certainly pick that up either in a formal board meeting or in a briefing session. Yeah,
thanks. Gareth.
Yeah, just two things, just to support, I think, what the Chief Executive has said about my stake, because although we should all have a mind towards the historic environment, adherence to old buildings is one thing, but when you're talking about modern facilities which can serve the population, that's another. And I think if they put in that terms, I think and good communication with the population, I think you will be persuasive. The other thing was just to comment, and I use the emergency services part of your report just to comment that I was in the ED on 2 days last week, 2 separate days, I should say, not one single getting nearly wept then, but just to say that I think that I mean, we all see it, especially those of us who do live locally on occasions when we have to take people, that they perform miracles on a daily basis in that place. And there must have been 60 to 70 people waiting when I was there. And just the flow, I realise I'm just blathering here, but I just to comment that I just thought it was miraculous the way they got through the flow there. And I thought, well, this is a board meeting and I'll just say it. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Gareth. Good, thank you. Okay, any other questions? Okay, thank you. We'll note the report. Thank you, Paul. We'll move on to item 5. 5.1 is the action log, which you've got sight of, and those things that are in progress and those suggested for closure. I don't know if anybody has any comments or questions that they wish to raise on the action log. No, otherwise we'll just note the report and obviously remove those items that are being proposed for closure. Okay, thank you very much. Item 5.2, matters arising not contained with the action log. Anybody need to raise anything at this point? Nope. Okay. At 5.3, the board assurance framework. We have our report in front of us, and I'm going to ask Callie to present the board assurance framework update report, which has been endorsed by the executive leadership group recently, and it's before the board for approval. Thank you, Callie.
Thank you, Chair. Just to reiterate, full members of where we met on the 15th of May to go through a really detailed discussion around our strategic risks and our board assurance framework. This report was produced prior to that meeting, so this is the reflections from previous to that board session. There was no significant changes in this report because we were looking forward to that session with you to go through in more detail. I've shared offline since that session the draft that we're working on for July, which hopefully accurately reflects what we discussed, the new risks that we were going to escalate and those ones that we needed to perhaps reflect, refrain and further develop. So I wasn't going to add anything further because I appreciate we probably moved on from this report and we're working on a July iteration, which hopefully more accurately reflects where we are as a board.
Thanks, Kelly. That's really helpful. Any comments or questions on the update report?
No, just to add
Patsy.
that it was discussed and agreed as a process, and that the detail in it accurately reflected the discussion on the assurance framework that we'd had as an additional board meeting at audit committee.
Thank you, Patsy. Okay. Thank you. Board content to approve the report. Thank you very much. 5.4, the annual review of the risk management framework. Again, I'll come back to Callie to present the report, which is for approval this morning. Thank you, Callie.
Thank you, Chair. And again, colleagues would be aware of this. I've shared it with board members through our Audit Risk and Assurance Committee. It's been through our Exec Management Board, and hopefully again reflect some of the decisions that we made at that board development session in terms of our risk appetite and our risk escalation continuing for the next 12 months and the changes we're going to make to our board assurance framework. As the board is responsible for setting strategic risk, it's important that as a board we approve and review this on an annual basis. So this is before you, hopefully reflecting the changes that you've all agreed to and considered.
Thanks, Callie. Any questions or comments? No. Ask board to approve the report. Thank you very much. Okay, 5.5, the board committee and advisory group highlight reports. 5.5.1, strategic development committee. We have received apologies from both the chair and the vice chair of the committee. You've got the update report in front of you from the meeting held on the 3rd of April. So it is for board members to note. I mean, are there any questions that board members wish to raise? And in the absence of the chair and the vice chair, we'll seek to get answers if there are any when they're back. No? Okay, we'll just note the update report. Thank you very much. 5.5.2, Quality and Safety and Experience Committee. And I'll ask Carolyn as chair of the committee to provide members with the updates on those matters highlighted to the board following their meeting of 25th of March, I think.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very happy. I'll take the paper as read. I'm very happy to answer any comments on that. But if I may, could I just give some verbal highlights from the report we had? Yes. Yeah, on the 20th of May, the meeting we had, so on the 20th of May. So in terms of issues for alert or escalate, we discussed the cluster of maternity related NRIs, nationally reportable incidents for Princess of Wales, and I think that's on the agenda.
Yes.
We also did discuss some of the challenges that are currently faced within the legal services function and some of the potential issues and mitigations there. And there was a positive escalation around, we wanted to commend the efforts of the relevant teams for the pace at which they worked to open the endoscopy and surgical vanguard theatres, recognising the excellent feedback received from patients and the positive impact from that. And just trying to get our heads around the scale and the speed of that process, which was hugely impressive. Just a couple of other things. We did again discuss the temporary mover stroke services in some detail, which was helpful. And we also had an in-depth presentation on the community dental services, in particular paediatric dental general anaesthesia, which is something that has been of concern to the committee for a long time now, and had a very helpful presentation of that. It was good to have the update on the harm-free care agenda, which focuses on 3 key work streams, which is inpatient falls, nutrition and pressure damage, and it was really useful to have a report in that format. The only other thing I wanted to highlight under Inform is that there were several awards and recognitions highlighted. I won't run through them all, but it was really good to note the number of awards and recognitions that people have had. And on a final note, I just wanted to say that the quality of reports and presentations we receive at Quality and Safety has improved enormously. And we, I think, get through a huge amount of work, and we are quite reflective of what goes through, but it is really down to the succinct reports and presenters, and that's really helped. So thank you to everybody for that, but very happy to take any questions.
Very helpful feedback. Thank you, Carolyn. And any questions to Carolyn on highlight? Paul?
Yeah, just not really a question on that, but it jogged my memory when Carolyn mentioned dental. I think we should have a think about how we get a dental update to board, because there's quite a lot of work going on nationally around the new dental contract, which I'll be honest, I slightly was passing me by until I had to sit down with Rob Davis the other day and he explained it all to me. And we need to, I think it's not, we need to, as an organisation, to make a response to that national consultation around the dental contract, but there are implications for our own in-house dental service as a consequence of those proposed changes to the national contract from next year. So, Kelly, maybe we can touch base on that side. I think it'd be useful to have a moment to do that. And it also picks up the point, Carolyn, about the long waiters in paediatric dentistry, because I think we've got 670 patients on the waiting list.
Yeah, I did a visit on CAS behalf actually to community dental services with Rob, and it was, I think it really would be useful to bring some of that to board. It was extremely informative, and I was unaware of quite how much the implication of that contract, also how much work is going on to try and address the community services.
Yes. Could we get a report to board for the end of July?
Yeah, we'll pick up with Julie and Sarah with that and Rob about that. I think we use.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Caroline. The next committee highlight report at 5.5.3 is the operational delivery committee. Again, we've received apologies from both the chair and the vice chair. The report is in front of you for noting for the meeting held on the 29th of April. Are there any questions or points on the update report that board members wish to raise now? No? Okay, we'll just note the report. Thank you. 5.6, we have an update this morning from Greg in respect of the cluster of incidents within maternity services at the Princess of Wales Hospital between March and May of this year. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just pull out a few key points from the paper, noting that we'll have a bit more detail in committee later. So POW obstetric unit reopened middle of February following staff being redeployed either to PCH Swansea or Cardiff due to initial electrical work and then obviously the roof challenges. So everybody got back together mid-February. And between mid-February and actually yesterday, we've had just over 400 very successful births within that unit. A cluster of NRI, so these are nationally reported incidents, or serious incidents. Two happened beginning of March, a third towards the end, and then we had a fourth one then on the 10th of May. 3 of these incidents related to C-section, and the fourth was sadly intrauterine death. All of the incidents, as with all of our NRIs, had a rapid review, so multidisciplinary team members sit around together to review incidents. And for 2 of these particular cases, the team felt that there were no fundamental care issues as part of the delivery. And in fact, 2 of the C-sections, the complications were highly unusual, and there was no concern with regards to operator error. The remaining 2 incidents, the team felt that there was some lapses of care, and maybe a different outcome would have ensued if different interventions were put in place. The paper states that just one of the incidents has been investigated externally following discussion that myself, Dom, Sally had with the care group leadership team a couple of weeks ago. We felt that actually it would be worthwhile having all 4 incidents externally reviewed, in part to kind of check and challenge our current findings in relation to the 2 we felt there were no specific issues, but it's always good to have that layer of external validation, I guess, or not in relation to all of the incidents. I think the paper goes on to describe quite a few of the immediate make safes we put in place following the incidents, and a raft of additional actions that both Dom, I and Sally's agreed with the maternity and neonatal team in relation to some more medium and long-term actions. It's worth pulling out a few, I think. So certainly, as of a couple of weeks ago, any intervention, so instrumental delivery or C-section, there will be a consultant obstetrician now present. We've increased the intrapartum support from a midwifery perspective, so women in second stage of labour, so essentially pushing their babies out. There's increase in senior midwifery support across the unit. We've instigated rapid skills and drills training through simulation. So we should best talk about prompt, which is essentially a multidisciplinary training program simulating often difficult births within the community. We equally do that within the hospital, but we felt that due to the increasing cluster, we needed to rapidly increase our skills and drills training. So that's with obstetrics, neonatologists, midwives, and neonatal nurses. Every few years, we undertake a significant midwifery staffing review against an empirical methodology called Birth Rate Plus. So we were going to do that next year, but we kicked off that work last month. So I guess if you could kind of summarize some of the challenges there, I think this challenge is centered around some leadership. There's been a change in leadership. Howell's team are currently there supporting staff from a culture and engagement perspective using the PACE survey, just so we can kind of get underneath the detail of if there are any more organic issues that we need to address, and equally some concerns around escalation. So because I'm just talking about a few incidents, it would be inappropriate to go into a level of detail because it could be identifiable to members of the public, but we do have a session in committee, and I'm happy to provide some further information on that session.
Thank you, Greg. That was really helpful. Are there any questions to Greg? Garrett and then Karen.
Only to help my understanding, because I'm very much a leader in these areas. In terms of the obstetric consultant attendance, from now on, all procedures, why was that not? Why was that not considered important before? Just to help me understand.
Yeah, well, I think Sally will come in here.
Yes. Oh, thank you.
So it is normal practice that so the cover on the labour ward, there's a consultant generally overseeing, there's registrar grade and middle grade who are very experienced, who have been doctors for 10, 15 years and many of those years in obstetrics, and they tend to do a lot of the doing on the labour ward. So they're extremely experienced, extremely competent. They go through all sorts of assessments and signing off. So it is normal practice for, generally speaking, the routine forceps, the routine caesareans to be done by the registrar with a consultant available either somewhere, somewhere nearby or on the end of the phone. So we've just upped it. It's probably more than we probably need to do, but because of these incidents, we are making sure that there is a senior consultant there for everything. But it is completely, and you go to any labour ward in the country, and that is how it is run.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that this has been discussed in detail at Quality and Safety Committee, both the main committee and in committee. And we have had a number of members of staff come to present on this and a thorough report on the actions that have been taken, etc. So we have taken assurance from that.
Thank you, Paul.
And we've talked about it as well, regularly at the exec team as well. But I think it was really important. We felt we wanted to make sure that we fought it here as well in public, because I think there is, we know maternity agenda is very, not just within CTM or in Wales, but you've only got to look on the UK news. There's constant updates around maternity services all over the UK. So I think it's really important that when we do have things that are outside of our norm, that we have a process by which we look into that and do the right assurance. And I think that was why we felt also bringing in some external pairs of eyes from outside of CTM, and actually both the people we've got are actually from outside of Wales, just gives an assurance to us. And it may well be that they'll say actually all of the things that we've done with the entirely appropriate things to the likelihood. I think if they're probably say, well, maybe this, maybe that, well, that's go back to the learning question. Absolutely. That's about learning from this situation, isn't it? So I think it's really important to have the opportunity to bring these sorts of situations and conversations into this plan.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, unless there are any other comments or questions, Greg, thank you for the update. Very much appreciated. We will return to this, as was alluded to earlier at the in-committee board meeting later. And I think on that point, we will take a slight break of around 15 minutes. So we will return about 5 to 11 minutes. let's move to item 6, delivering our plan. And we'll start with the integrated performance dashboard. And in Vicky's absence, I know that Gethin's going to start the introduction and the discussion on the dashboard. Thank you, Gethin.
No, thank you, Chair. And as per norm, we'll take people through the different sections of the integrated performance report and go through that. So if I pick up in the first instance around operational performance, then I'll hand over to colleagues on their specific areas. I won't go through in detail, but I suppose just a couple of things to pick up. So just building on your comments in your chair's update, we're continuing to see a reduction in the 104-week cohort. As we didn't quite land, as I reported in the last board, where we wanted to year end, but a significant reduction from a high of 13,000 patients waiting over 2 years to well under 1,000 at the end of this financial year. We have an agreed plan with Welsh Government to reduce that number to 450 patients by the end of Q1 this year. We remain on course with that. We have now got additional insourcing capacity for orthopedics, which is the key specialty, and as well as continued outsourcing. So we have got patients who are being treated in independent sector, both in South Wales but also in Bristol, with some financial support from Welsh Government. We are working with them to look at what opportunities there are for some further support in Q2 that would allow us to move to 0 patients waiting over 104 weeks by the end of Q2. If there isn't additional funds available, then that's a position we won't be able to achieve until the end of Q3. So we're working closely with colleagues in Welsh Government on that. The other piece, just in terms of RTT, is that there is a national procurement underway, which is to procure a quantum of 210,000 additional outpatients this year for Wales. We have been given our allocation of we will have an allocation of that contract, which will need forward sign off for us, but that is being procured nationally with a single provider, and then excuse me, we'll get an allocation of activity related to that to be provided out of hours. And then there is an additional sum of £50,000, £50,000, which is going to be given to us to see a further 8,000 outpatients through whichever mechanism we so wish. Having done the first cut of those numbers, we'll probably look to augment the national procurement for most of those specialties, because it will be a continuation of specialties already covered. That for us will mean that we will be seeking to see an additional 30,000 outpatients across quarters 2 to 3 and 4 this financial year, which is a significant volume, and will probably bring our first outpatient waiting time down significantly. We're modelling it for each specialty, but certainly well below 52 weeks for a first outpatient appointment. Welsh Government are also going to be commissioning additional diagnostic capacity to support that, so that we get to a place where the vast majority of those patients will be seen, assessed and discharged, and within that would be their diagnostic phase and their follow-up treatment. If patients need listing then for operative treatment or longer term care, we would then take them onto our waiting list as part of that. So that's that is an exciting development. So we're working through the logistics of that as we speak, but certainly for our population will mean those patients that are waiting a long time, first outpatient appointments will be picked up. In terms of cancer, we continue to operate at the above 60%. Our de-escalation requirements is to have 3 months sustained at 63%. So that we're aiming for now in Q2. And hopefully then by Q3 we'll be able to be de-escalated from enhanced monitoring cancer down to normal treatment. And we continue to perform within normal range for mental health, and have clear plans in place for the vast majority of our diagnostic modalities to ensure sustainably to get down to the 8-week position. I think the main thing I just wanted to flag really was around urgent care. Our urgent care performance still isn't achieving the levels that we would want, and despite Geraint's commentary of his excellent treatment at the Royal Glamorgan, which is lovely to hear, we still are we're not sustainably able to ensure the timely handover of our ambulances, and for those patients who need admission, too many of them are still waiting over 12 hours in our emergency department. So there is a revised plan that is being finalised at the moment, which I'll bring to ODC and then to board in July, to outline that staged reduction to deliver the requirements as set out in the MAG report, which we touched on earlier. But very much seeing a staged reduction that would take our handover, our maximum tolerance of handovers down from 4 hours to 2 hours, and then down to the 45 minutes. So we are working through the detailed implementation plan of that as we speak. And at that point, I will take any questions.
I think what we'll do is perhaps if we hold off on the questions until we get through some of the other exec director updates as well, because that might be a bit better of different questions. So Greg, I'll come to you next.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Sure, just a few updates from me. So page 33, the IP&C section. Board members will recall that I brought a new IP&C strategy here 4 to 6 months ago. That's now in operation. We've revised the operating model. We now have a community service running, which is great. We're focusing on some of the care homes where we see most patients coming in with specific infections. So we have teams out there supporting care homes with education and training, which is something we've been wanting to do for a while. So hopefully we'll start to see some of the community cases come down. I am concerned around ANTT training, so that's aseptic non-touch technique training when staff are undertaking wound care in relation to our low compliance. So we have to focus on that internally across all of our acute and community sites. The national programme would work around C. difficile. So you will see in the report the significant increase compared to last year. This is replicated across the rest of the health boards in Wales and indeed in England. So there's a new healthcare acquired infection programme board across Wales now, which is very much a part of. There's a big focus on reducing C. difficile across our communities. Antibiotic stewardship is much better these days because we have more pharmacy support. So big focus on C. diff across the health board and across country. Good progress with our gram-negative bacteremias. Board members may recall the last couple of years we were managed around some of the Klebsiella, E. coli, Pseudomonas. They're all tracking lower than last year, so which is really positive. I'm more assured now around consistency in catheter care than what I have been. We still have some concerns around line care, so line care going into veins, be it peripherally or centrally. Focus on that. And finally, the thorny issue of our legacy NRIs. This time last year we had 70, we've just got 25 now. So the team have worked really well, on bringing down the legacy so they can focus on kind of today's work and keep on going back. So I think that's it for my section. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Greg. Okay, I'll come to Sally next to present on the medical director. Thank you.
Nothing too much from me, I suppose, to highlight the mortality section on 37, page 37, you can see the mortality rate is within expected levels. We have a low ED mortality rate compared to other health boards. This is due to the fact that we've increased the admissions from there. So admitted, so the ward mortality rate is is higher in relation. So between the two, it means our overall mortality rate is within expected and comparable to peers. That's probably all I've got to say.
Thanks, Sally. Okay, I'll come to Lauren and then Philip. Thank you. Thanks, Lauren.
Thank you. So if I give some additional information about some of the bits that are on 2020 and 21, so that's the where most of the HP and healthcare science professional services sit. So from an HP perspective, continue to maintain very good RTT performance overall, but physio is our most pressured service. So just to say that there's significant work underway, looking at the quality and the appropriateness of the referrals at the point of triage, engaging with primary care about first line interventions, and making sure that only the right referrals come through to our specialist HP teams. They've started some rollout in terms of text reminders to try to increase efficiency, and then also some general innovations, lots of work upskilling others, so falls prevention and awareness to care home staff. And then we've also done some, the speech and language therapy team have been doing some virtual reality training of care home staff, which increases our capacity or has less of a detriment on our capacity from a staffing point of view, and it's shown some really good outcomes. And then there's also some work being done on an all Wales basis around the children's waiting times. And then audiology. So we've had our first pan-CTM external audit around paediatric audiology, and the team have achieved a compliance of 96.7%. So great recognition of the team's commitment and work there. And then just to say, we've recently had our planned HIW ionising radiation inspection in Prince Charles Radiology Department, and that was good overall. We've got one immediate action that we need to address, but work was already underway on that, and we've got no concerns about being able to turn that around. But a huge amount of work and effort in terms of the self-assessment, the prep work that goes into this. So just recognition of the work done by the radiology team and PCH.
Thank you, Lauren. Philip, I'll come to you next, and after yours, Philip, I think Howell then will come to the workforce section of the report. So thank you, Philip.
Great, thank you very much. I want to update on 3 items: smoking, influenza vaccines for 65 pluses, and childhood vaccination. Smoking, for the 2nd year running, we've exceeded the target of 5% of smokers who attempt via smoking cessation services. And we're continuing to build on that as well. I mean, the main challenge we have is around carbon monoxide validation. So people get tested essentially to see whether they have carbon monoxide, which would be indicative that they're still smoking. A lot of the services people want to access remotely, and therefore pulling them in for CO validation sort of goes against the grain. And in fact, there's some resistance from people that it's not based on trust as well. And so that's across the board. That's across Wales. What we are doing is we are bolstering Help Me Quit in hospitals, Help Me Quit for babies. That's working with pregnant mums. We're improving comms, and we're working more closely with primary care, including optometry, using the Making Every Contact Count approach. You'll be aware that the tobacco and vapes bill is about to be implemented from June, which will have a range of impacts, not least disposable vapes are being banned on environmental grounds, but it will obviously affect people. And we will see far more enforcement in terms of smoking. So within the hospital site, we're implementing tannoy systems, reminding people that they are not to smoke on hospital property. We're also looking at bolstering the number of Help Me Quit advisors that we have in place, and we're doing work nationally, but I'll leave that there. In terms of children who under 5's vaccine, we are above the Welsh average. We're under where we want to be. If you look on page 7, you'll see that we consistently track above the Welsh average. and in order to get us up to where we would like to be, there has been a drop-off since COVID, essentially. Improving training, we're doing lots of work around MMR mop-up, especially in light of outbreaks in Bristol, etc. And provision of fluens to LA local authority nurseries in Merthyr Tydfil RCT, as well as work around data as well, moving to e-consent. We were using paper up until now, and it is providing a barrier. So looking to just improve our data systems. So that's that. Over 65 influenza, like other places in Wales and other places in the UK, we are seeing considerable vaccine fatigue. Having said that, I mean, if you look at the data, we're back to, we have this idea that there's this drop off after COVID-19, sort of 2023. We're actually back to where we were in 2019, right? And so that blip, hopefully, we can continue to build on, and we'll push it back up to the 95% level. We are less than 1% away from the Welsh average, but clearly there's lots of work to do. We're increasing the number of additional permanent posts, and they're being advertised. There's the proposal for a vaccination bus to tackle our inequalities issues, taking the service out to people rather than expecting people to come to our services. Again, support for community pharmacy, and we will shortly be bringing the vaccine delivery and equity plans to various fora in terms of committees and ultimately board. Clearly, there's a lot of moving parts in terms of national arrangements, in terms of central purchasing, etc., and the GP arrangements, and we're just going to have to be agile and pivot to those. But it's an upward trajectory. So thank you for that.
Carol, thank you very much.
Thanks, Chair. So a couple of things from me. So just starting off with sickness absence. So I think we've discussed it at the board a couple of times, the sort of stubborn staticness of sickness absence across the health board. We haven't quite got to pre-pandemic levels yet. And even pre-pandemic, we were a bit of an outlier in terms of the former CT in terms of sickness absence. So we are, I've been having some conversations with my team recently just about perhaps shifting our approach away from some more processy measures in relation to sickness absence and focusing on some of the causes. We'll hear a little bit more about that later on when we talk through the people plan as well. We know that a lot of our sickness is to do with stress and pressure related sickness. So we've work to do there, and we've also discussed as a board previously about the extent to which burnout is a feature of our current system. So some of the conversation we had earlier about improving and increasing the availability of workforce are quite crucial, hopefully, in this area. So probably a bit of a work in progress on sickness, and I'll bring something back in future boards on that. Nursing turnover, however, it has shot right down. So you'll remember we were at a high of just shy of 12% this time 2 years ago. We're currently down at 4.94%. I can't with any conscience tell you that is how I expect turnover to continue for nursing. I think that would be amazing if it did, but I don't think we understand that well enough yet to know whether or not that's going to sustain. And we've only got a couple of data points at the moment. We've had sort of 3 months in a row of relatively low turnover. We will, however, keep an eye on that. But we know we have had some successes, for example, around the lateral move scheme, which we are continuing to expand and make available to other staff groups and more staff groups within nursing as well. But that is a real benefit for us at the moment, because it's meaning we're catching up in terms of the amount of people who are leaving us versus those we're able to recruit. Just then moving on to staff demand training and core skills compliance. I think those two graphs are the very definition of slow and steady improvement. A little slower than I'd liked, but fairly continuous improvement over the last couple of years. So our core training compliance now is at 80.8%. That's pretty good, just shy of the 85% target. So we've got a little bit more to do there. EDR, combined medical and non-medical, we're around about the 70% mark, which again, stubbornly slow trajectory there, but it is creeping up almost every month. But if you take your eye off the ball on either of those things, and they're dynamic, so they will shoot straight down. So we're really grateful again, I will say this, to operational and clinical teams for maintaining focus on those two things when they've got a million other things to do. Just on PDR, we have also just recently had an internal audit of our new PDR process that we introduced a couple of years back with a good outcome. So that's been reassuring. A few tweaks to make to that process, hopefully to improve it and make it even easier for people to do it even more meaningful, but generally a good picture on that. That's probably it from me, Chair.
Thank you, Harold. Much appreciated. Okay. Range of matters raised by the exec team and their updates. Questions or comments from the board? Patsy first. Thank you very much.
Yeah, a couple of questions. My first one is on the mortality, and I know Sally did point this out. In the general overview update from the Welsh Government targets under quality, it says the rolling 12-month mortality rate is 2.63 with a red arrow pointing sideways, suggesting it's not changed, but it's not good. I just wonder, what's the point of the mortality rate? I get if you get spikes in mortality, but it seems a strange thing to measure. Do you want me to ask a few different questions first, or shall
we deal with that question first?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, yeah.
It's just the point of it.
Well, I think you're right. I think it's the broad point is if it was a great outlier, then obviously that would be a cause for concern. But you're right. It's more. What is more interesting is looking underneath that and looking at trends in various areas, which is what we do at a lower level. It's not obviously not reported up here, but you're right. The broad mortality rate, it has a limited use, I suppose, except that if it was very bad, then that clearly wouldn't be a good thing.
In having a target for it, does it in any way create a defensive
I don't
practice, or
no, I don't think so. I don't think anybody looks. As you'll know, all our deaths are scrutinised. All of them are investigated at one level or another. So I honestly don't think there would be any ability to fudge anything. So
no, I'm not suggesting fudging. Something has a, I don't know, 40 or 30% chance of working, would they think, oh no, I'm not going to do that because that might result in mortality?
I don't think they think that in affecting the mortality rates. Clearly, there would be a discussion with the individual as to what they would feel is acceptable. But no, I don't think that it would.
I mean, just about that. I mean, I think you're right, Patsy, that it's quite a crude metric. I think there's something about though making sure, as Sally said, that if it was clearly going in the wrong direction, we'd be wanting to make sure we understood why. There is quite a bit of work going on, Sally, isn't there, with Dom, and we were looking at how we get better data, because part of this is also the data and information. And as Sally rightly said, the interesting thing is when you break it down to a specialty or a particular area, and you actually get underneath, well, why is the mortality with one clinician maybe slightly different to another clinician? And is that the fact that they're dealing with all the high risk cases? Maybe that is the case, but there's something about it's using the data to try and engineer the conversation rather than just using it as a blunt instrument to sort of oversee people. But I think it's important for us as an organisation and a board that we do just keep that weather eye on the mortality number, because if it does start tracking upwards, we would want to probably understand as a board what's driving that.
And my other question is linked to the other operational performance of 100% of GP practicing achieving in-hours access. And we all know, we'll have talked to anybody, once you say you work for the NHS, the first comment is I can never get an appointment with GP. But really, I was wondering if that has had an impact on the rates of people going to A&E, which I would expect it has, because people who can't get appointments will turn up at A&E. And if we had the data over a sort of 5-6 year period, how much has that increased, or has it increased? I don't know, because I can't see.
So the GP access question is a perennial discussion, I think. And of course, we're measuring the things that people who did get through What about all the people who didn't get through? And how do we capture all the unmet demand that is out there? Because those are the people who are then saying, I can't get an appointment with a GP. I'm as you might know, I'm the National League Chief Step Lead on Primary Care. I am asking the question routinely of Welsh Government colleagues about what are we doing on GP access? And I did have a conversation with the Cabinet Secretary's advisor earlier this week to say, if I was in Cabinet Secretary's shoes, it would probably be the number one thing I'd be worrying about. Given, as you said, Patsy, that, generally if you ask people what's your issue with the NHS, they'll all say GP appointments, more so than I'm on a waiting list for an operation or I'm waiting for a diagnostic test. So I don't think we have cracked it. And I think there is something we've got to do collectively in CTM. I think there's an opportunity perhaps to do some focused work on this. But it does come right, it does drive right down to the nub of particularly urgent primary care. So your point, Patsy, about correlation with ED is particularly for people who feel their need is so urgent that needs to be met today. And if it can't be met at my GP practice, I'm going to go to the emergency department instead. So we are trying to, some of this is, our ability to change behaviours is sometimes a bit challenging because this is a cultural norms as well. So if you look at what's happened at PCH, where we've put a GP facility in the department, not as a GP service, but where people do come through the front door, there is an ability to sort of side track them to a GP rather than putting them through the ED. Now, what the challenge with that is, you've got to be careful that you don't then create a narrative locally which says, oh, if you want a GP appointment, just go up there, it's quicker. So we're constantly in this balance, but I mean, getting from the as well.
So yeah, thank you.
So I guess the bits just to add, Patsy, in terms of the data, it's really difficult to do the cause and effect between practices and ED. We do record ED attendances, and at triage, why didn't you see a GP? I couldn't get an appointment. Now, when you speak to the practices, whilst we can't match that patient, they will often say, no, we had appointments today. So there is a custom and practice, which is there won't be any appointments, because that's what newspapers have told me. So therefore, I'm just going to go straight to A&E. What we do a lot, where we've got some really good data, is around out of hours, and particularly so we can see trends with specific practices where there is clearly a constraint on the day, and the volume of calls we get from their patients at 5 o'clock when the out of hours phone switches on. And so there is a lot of work being done with individual practices, because it is clear there are a number of practices who do not have adequate in hours urgent on the day capacity, and therefore they are encouraging patients, if once they're full, to wait and then call out of hours. So we are working with them on that. But equally, some patients will have been managed virtually and still want to be seen. And so again, there is a challenge. So it is, but we have got good data for trends. It's getting, and we're working with those practices where there are challenges.
Getting a quick couple of questions if I may at this point. When we look at the waiting time targets and broadly the targets we are set by government as part of the planning framework, I know the extent of the work that we're doing to meet those particular targets. I think it might be quite useful maybe over the next couple of months when we're able to, is perhaps through a board briefing session to work through what our own ambition is, because obviously government says, well, this is our target, but it may well be the case that we are doing more thoughtful, innovative work that might deliver something a bit more ambitious. And I'm wondering whether, when the time is right, perhaps we could do a board briefing that says, do you know what, this is where we know what our reportable information tells us, that goes back to Welsh Government, but these are the sorts of things now where we're really providing more focused work in order to do better, because we've got the ambition around these sorts of areas of delivery here in CTM, and I think that might be quite useful when we're able to do that.
No. Well, we've done that, and that's been shared through the executive leadership group. So I'm happy to bring it perhaps to ODC and then share it more broadly. Okay. We're just updating it because we did that prior to the allocation of the additional capacity from being funded from Welsh Government. Where we were targeting was, aside from orthopedics, we are aiming for all our specialties to move by year end to a 78-week RT2 position. So that's 78 weeks from referral to treatment. Now that will come down further. So the national position is mandated at 104 weeks.
Yep.
We're trying to drive that lower across all our specialties. Some specialties are lower further.
Anyway, yeah.
You know, and now we need to build in what this additional capacity will deliver for us, so that we can look at that. But I would hope that that will bring many of our specialties closer to a 60-week RT2 position, rather than so again really helping access for our patient.
Thanks. Okay, I've got a couple of other points afterwards, but I'll come back to those. Any other questions? Okay. Just very quickly on outpatients. Part of the ministerial ambition that was launched by the Cabinet Secretary on the 7th of April included a commitment or ambition. Any patient that misses 2 outpatient appointments should be removed from the list. Now, we're still waiting to hear from Welsh Government as to how that has been managed and what consideration we have to give to the different types of patient that will be in front of us. I'm just wondering, in terms of whether we've had the time to do the analysis or whether it's something that we could be working on. But if we were looking at CTM over a 2 to 3 year period, what does that tell us about our own performance? How many people historically have missed 2 appointments? We know some people will say to us that access is challenging, because if you've got an appointment at a hospital that might be difficult to get to from some distance away, you might not have a car, the buses are infrequent, or you can't afford the bus. So we know there are reasons as to why people find the challenge, why there are challenges of accessing appointments. But I was wondering if it was possible for us to look at what that would mean for us if that is something that is to be implemented.
It's 800 patients.
800 patients.
Yeah, are on our waiting list who've had 2 who've DNA'd on 2 occasions.
Okay.
Is that adult and children?
Yeah, across all specialties.
Okay.
So you're right. So we haven't had any guidance on it.
Yeah.
It does have to be addressed with caution, because in kids,
It does.
there's always actually a red flag when kids don't turn up for appointments routinely. So we just give, as you said before, John, this is about what's the guidance that can come alongside that. Because it sounds a sensible thing to try and implement, but we need to put some caveats and look at it in terms of which groups of patients we're actually talking about. Because if I'm honest, you might well find that the people didn't even know they had an appointment because the letter didn't arrive on time.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah, although it's interesting. We had a patient, so the additional capacity we're running at Prince Charles at the moment at weekend, a patient who had been verbally, been spoken to and verbally accepted an appointment for a procedure, then just didn't turn up. So it is. So it is really challenging. So that's a theatre session then lost. It's an hour and a half worth of operating that we.
Hey.
And are we going to be extending that over all services rather than just kind of orthopedic or?
It's every. Yeah. It's not just consultant-led services. It's every.
Yeah,
service.
because I think the acceptance of that is different between services, whereas maybe patients feel a little bit more acceptable to DNA, like an HP, and then be expected to be reappointed straight away.
I think, Hayley, we've got to be really, in some ways, the fact the Cabinet Secretary set out that expectation is actually quite helpful, because it gives us a very clear mandate nationally to say this isn't CTM making this decision, this is a national decision.
People will come back through the books, they'll rejoin the waiting list again, and it'll be, I've suffered this for years and years and years, no one's.
So our access policy will be clear, and it doesn't cover just consultant appointments, it covers all appointments. And so it is then about, and then it is about us then, the policy is there, and we need to manage it.
Neil.
I guess there's 2 purposes for that. Partly it's changing behaviour, and you have to communicate the policy so that you can change behaviour. I guess secondly, it'll have an impact on the stats, it'll make the stats improve. I guess it's the former that you're trying to move, not the latter. But again, it's critical, I think, from a communication perspective, that people understand the implications of missing 2 appointments is that you do now go to the backup queue, so that we do affect that change of behaviour.
Now you'll be removed, so you'll just be handed back to your GP.
Yeah. Okay.
And then if you wish to, you'll have to go through the whole process to begin. So we there are other rules around missing certain appointments will result in you going back to the bottom of the queue anyway. This is about removal from the queue completely.
But it's that change of behaviour, I think,
absolutely.
is the critical thing. And how do you communicate that in such a way that people understand the impact of doing it?
And I don't want to bring it right back to the digital, but this is really where the digital patient contact needs is so important, because you think about every one walk of life, even to go and get my hair cut, you get endless bloody texts reminding you to cut, and I know, and that's to your point, about how you prompt behaviour and nudge people to turn up and things is constantly check. Or it may be if you've got people are high risk of not DNAing, you have a proactive phone out service, or what. Now you're never going to legislate for the person who, even when they're booked to have an orthopaedic procedure, doesn't turn up on the day. That's just not life, right? But we've got to do everything we can do, and as you say, explain to people why it's so important. But also we've got to make it as easy as possible to rebook. Because part of the reason why people don't turn up is that they don't know how to go about rebooking it, or they've tried free phone numbers and they weren't able to get to anybody. So it's all about also having the process of doing that as easy as possible.
And no, I mean, agree with both those points. And how do we not widen inequalities whilst doing it? Because some people are more able to engage with services, right? And so we don't want to blacklist entire communities almost by dint of where they live. So.
Just a final point, unless there's anybody else that wants to raise anything else on the performance report. On our cancer performance, obviously hitting 60.7%. We've got the target of this new year, so that by the end of March next year, we need to be on that trajectory getting as close to the 80% performance target as possible. We know over the past 12 months or so, there's been some sustained improvement in areas of our cancer services, not least in breast cancer, but I know there's a focus now in other areas. And I suppose perhaps again, if we're doing this in a briefing session, it might be useful to come back and say, well, in cancer, here we know these have been particularly challenged areas for us to improve and sustain performance improvement, but this is where our focus will now be. That will actually get us to the point of where we're getting closer and closer to that 80% mark.
Yeah, no, absolutely, John. I'm happy to bring that back. The deep dive. I think it is important to note that we are, in order to get sort of 75% and above, we are particularly reliant on other health boards for tertiary pathways of care. So that would be Belindra for neoadjuvant treatment for chemotherapy particularly, but also Cardiff for tertiary surgery and Swansea. And those waiting times at the moment are quite long. And so it is there are pieces of work we need to do around streamlining all of those pathways with our partners to ensure that we can get closer to delivering that, the expectation that we all want to deliver for our population.
Neil,
I think it might be useful if in that briefing is if we can just triangulate that back to the MAG report, and understand what the MAG report is then saying about sort of taking the next steps in cancer as well, because I think it's an interesting report, and I think it's been generally positively received. And I hear lots of positive statements about these are the right things to be doing anyway. But if they're the right things to be doing, then why are they in the MAG report and why haven't they already done them? I just would be an open question. So,
yeah, absolutely. Just on the Belindra point about I think we also, there's something for us about how we also just make sure we're getting through our contracting routes and performance management routes with Belindra that because I know Gethin does regularly flag from an ops perspective through to ops colleagues in Belindra, but we all should forget that Belindra are commissioned by us to deliver services to a certain standard. So I think there's something about also how we make sure through our contracting and performance review meetings with Belindra about that we need to be keeping an eye on that we're not being adversely impacted by non-delivery of things that we're actually contracting and paying them to deliver for us.
Any other questions on the rest of the report? No? Okay, thank you much. We'll note the report. Moving on to 6.2, the financial performance update, and we have the month 12 update as well as the month 1 update. So Sally, thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, I'm treating you to 2 reports, right?
Yes.
One. So in terms, if we just take the reports largely as read, and I'll just draw out a couple of things. Month 12, you'll see that we are reporting, and this is obviously subject to ongoing audit at the moment. In terms of revenue, a small, it's shown as 0.1 million. Surplus was actually 96k for a bit more precision. That's against total allocations of 1.784 billion. So significantly under 1% variance from where we were, and on the right side in terms of delivering our break-even requirements. That means that's the second year we've delivered break-even, but in terms of our overall duty, we still fail because of the 24 million deficit in 22-23. So until we get deliver break even for another year, we are still in a position where we will not have delivered against that duty. In terms of capital, we are at a 63k surplus against a final capital resource limit of 94.8 million. So again, significantly less than 1% variance against what was, as you know, a fairly backloaded programme with significant monies being allocated towards the latter part of the year. So I think that's a positive position to arrive at, clearly subject to audit. Savings were not where we wanted them to be, but overall we came into the year with a positive position, and our underlying position was 7.9 million deficit. There are some issues we just need to, I'll pick up in terms of month 1. Can I take any questions on month 12 now, if there are any?
Thank you, Sally. Any comments or questions? But before we go to month 1, I think it is absolutely right that we as a board should publicly recognise the enormity of the work that's been done to attempt to manage what we do within the resources that are set by Welsh Government, and the fact that we were able to more than break even, a little bit more than break even in the last financial year and the year before that, accepting that the year before that we didn't. So, you know, this, if we break even in this financial year, of course, we'll make that statutory duty across the 3 years. But a huge amount of work is done by Sally and the team, and of course working very closely with the care groups and the entirety of our organisation to try and be as efficient and effective as possible with the resources that we have. And it's not an easy job to do, but a lot of this huge amounts of this comes down to the robustness of the financial planning at the outset, and the work that Sally and the team lead. So I just want to say thank you to you, Sally, for what you've done and what your team have been able to deliver. And yeah, it's not easy, because there aren't just huge pressures within the system. There are huge expectations and hope from staff who would obviously like to be able to do more than perhaps they're able to do, because the resources are so very tight. And I know that none of this is without risk. So thank you for what you've been able to do.
I think it's thank you for that. I mean, it is about all the budget holders who work on this and who sort of work very closely. And if you consider the disruption to services from the critical incident, the fact that we were able to still deliver break even is a testament to the work across the organisation, because that was a huge amount of disruption, and we got there with a small additional allocation in year, but not anywhere near the cost. So if I move on to month 1, so we park that one and we now move on to a new year. You'll remember that in terms of our plan for this year, we increased our savings target to an ambitious 31 million in order to be able to support investment into critical service delivery areas and priorities. In month 1, savings delivery is significantly under where we would want it to be. Now, there's a little bit of the fact that is month 1 reporting and people are still working through things, but it is nevertheless a concern, and we'll need to focus on that very extensively. The other thing I just want to point to people to is really in terms of some of the allocation risks that we are still carrying. So the 24-25 pay awards at 50 million were allocated out non-recurrently last year while they continue to work through the exact amount. So the whole 50 million is clearly not at risk, but at the margins, which could be a couple of £1 million either way, we are still awaiting a final position for that. And we're now pretty much at the end of month 2. Employers NI, which, as you know, was the large change that came through as part of this year's budget. We've estimated the impact to be 14.8 million. That's what's included in our anticipated allocations. We are not yet clear on what will be allocated against that, and there is a risk that there is insufficient funding to support the whole of that sum, which is what we've calculated to be the impact. And then finally, to go back to the critical incident and the measures we've put in place, as you know, that includes the Vanguard unit to ensure that we're still delivering our sort of operating capacity and other costs, which we estimated at around 10 million. So we've got an income assumption in our plan around that, which is, if you remember how we submitted our balanced IMTP, acknowledging that needed supporting. We have not had any feedback on that at this point, so that remains a significant risk. You'll note that at this point, the 25-26 pay awards aren't included in that sort of assessment of anticipated allocations. They've now been notified through, although clearly subject to ongoing consultation and acceptance from union colleagues. But at this point, you know, we haven't yet included that or seen how that funding will flow. Last year, one of the issues that was large at debate was funding up of the wage awards applied to bank staff, which for whatever reason the matrix excluded, despite the fact they're part of national terms and conditions, and clearly we don't pay our bank colleagues on lower salary rates than anybody else.
Is in the pay circular this year mentioned specifically, which is different to last year. So hopefully that will result in a better study.
And they mitigate some of our risk on last year. So I'm happy to take any questions. It is quite early days, but savings is clearly the issue we need to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I mean, just to reiterate what Sally said, we've had no feedback on the IMTP at all. It got submitted at the end of March and we're nearly in June. And we've had nothing. So we haven't even, apart from an acknowledgement of receipt, there's been no feedback on it. So, it's not just about the financial element of it, it's the whole entirety of it. So that's one thing. And just on the same, we've got a conversation at ELG next Monday, focusing on savings plans, where we are, particularly with the four big corporate programs, talk you through at the last board briefing. And we'll be going back through that, and also just understanding where we are with those schemes, but also mitigations that we need to put in place to deal with. Because it is early days, but what we don't want to do is allow this situation to sort of snowball over the coming months to get to this mid-year issue. So it is very much on our radar, and we should be covering that on Monday.
Patsy.
Just a quick question. I was going to ask you about the risks around the allocation for critical incident, but adding to it 14 million for NI, does that mean our material risks is around 50 million as opposed to 38?
We've mitigated some of it. We will be funded for employers NI. We've made estimates around what, but the early indications are that the total amount that's been allocated to Welsh Government is not going to meet the whole cost across the Welsh public sector, and that is subject to an ongoing conversation. So it could be, we've tried to place an estimate in our risks around what that might be, but
so the 38 does include some
some
element of risk, even though it says TBC. Fine.
Thank you, Patsy. Okay. Any questions to Sally on month 1 in terms of some of the risks that we're carrying at the moment? And I know, certainly appreciate the work that Howell is also leading on, around some of the how we deal with our efficiencies, how we look to bring those savings in. Appreciate this month month 1 is we're out, but and some of that data needs to be worked through. But clearly, there's an ambitious savings plan, which it's in our interest to deliver that, because we have the ambition to deliver on the expenditure that we've identified for those priority areas, particularly around addressing some of our deficits in digital and data, the work that we need to do around delivering our acute clinical services plan. So this isn't just about making the organisation more effective and efficient. There's a very real, tangible benefit to delivering our savings plan, because it means we have the resources to do the sorts of things that we really do need to get on with. So, and I appreciate the work that you and the team are doing to support that agenda as well. Any other comments or questions? No? Okay, Sally, thank you very much indeed for the update on month one. We'll move to 6.3, which is the people plan for 2024-25. Yes. No.
25-30.
Oh, so it's on my notes written differently. Sorry, it's my fault. I would say probably put my glasses on, but as you see, they're already on. So the people plan. Howell, thank you. This is for approval. Again, can I, before we go into this, say how much I appreciate the level of engagement that the team have had and the discussions that Henry and I have had around the people plan. Really fantastic to see the speed at which this has been pulled together. The level of consideration, the amount that's gone into developing the plan. Absolutely fantastic. So again, Hayley, thank you very much indeed for the work you've done, and you, Howell, and the team. Superb. But over to you.
Yeah, so I wasn't going to, because I likely steal some of Hayley's thunder, and she's done the vast majority of the work on this. So yeah, I mean, what this is for is to set out our ambition for our people over the next 5 years. So I'll hand straight over to Hayley to run us through what that looks like.
I'll move around there so that I'm not speaking to half of your backs, because I haven't got a whizzy presentation or anything. And for those that I haven't met properly yet, my name's Hayley Jones. I'm Deputy Director here. So as Howell said, this is a really high chair. This agenda item was to update you on where we've got to with the development of our people plan and to request board endorsement ahead of publication. So the overarching principle that we've taken throughout this work has been one of co-development. We really want our people plan to resonate with our workforce and for them to see their feedback, their ideas, their voices reflected back to them. We also know that our people plan is one of the levers that we can pull to demonstrate that we are taking tangible action in response to the staff survey feedback that people have shared with us. So what we've done over the past 3 months is essentially talk to as many of our staff as possible about what the priority actions would look like for them and what would have the biggest impact on their day-to-day working lives to make sure that CTM is a great place where everyone can thrive by the time we get to CTM 2030. We've spoken to over 560 individuals, a real mix of people across our sites and main hospitals, a real mix of staffing groups, different tenure, different experience, different roles. So a real diversity of voice, but nonetheless some really consistent themes coming out of that feedback that was shared with us. And of course, as I just mentioned, we also have a really rich data source in terms of our staff survey. We know over 3,500 of our people took the time to complete that and share that feedback with us. So taken together, we feel we've got a pretty rich evidence base on which to base our people plan actions. You can see from their report in the cover note, but what we heard from our people is that when we're at our best, CTM really feels like family. We've got a really incredible sense of community, and the feeling was that actually that sets us apart from many other organisations, and it's what keeps a lot of our people working here. We know we're friendly, we're welcoming, we go above and beyond for our immediate teams and in terms of patient care. We heard some really, really incredible stories throughout those engagement sessions about patient care. And we also heard some really inspiring examples about the impact of having a great manager who listens to really turn around teams and impact on individual engagement and performance there. However, we also heard lots of frustrations, particularly around cumbersome processes, policies, systems that just take up time and hinder rather than help. So there was a really resounding desire for us to cut through that, simplify bureaucracy, free up people's time so that they can focus on the things that really matter. We also heard feedback about a need and desire to reduce inequities between teams. And actually this comes back to the discussion we had earlier around shift patterns. So a real desire for CTM to feel fair, to feel consistent, no matter what staff group, what team you're working in. And for great line management to be the norm rather than a kind of special added bonus if you've got a great line manager. So synthesising all of that feedback that we had from the direct engagement sessions, alongside all of the quantitative and qualitative feedback that we had in the staff survey, alongside internal and external evidence reviews and the Cabinet Secretary priorities and the MAG report, we've proposed 4 core people priority themes that we believe really need focused attention over the next 5-year period. The first one of those themes, probably won't surprise you to hear, is getting the basics right. So this is about simplifying our processes, our policies, the administrative tasks that go alongside all of our jobs day in, day out. Making sure that we have modern, reliable IT, fit for purpose estates and facilities. And essentially simplifying bureaucracy to free up people's time and make every day easier. The second core priority is around great management and leadership. And it's important to point out here, I think, that actually we feel that the majority of effort here needs to be focused on management. So our first line managers and our middle managers, as opposed to senior leadership, where we have actually already done a fair amount of work. But it does feel like we've got a bit of a gap at the moment in terms of setting our managers up for success, really equipping and enabling them with the skills and time and confidence they need to do their roles properly, as opposed to just promoting someone into management and hoping they find their feet. So some of the actions underneath that one are things like introducing a line management induction programme, or a licence to operate, if you will. Also looking at learning and development that we need for our line managers to really set them up for success, and things like peer networks so that they've got that support system around them. The third priority is around building an inclusive and healthy environment. So this touches on some of the feedback that we heard around wanting CTM to be fair, to be consistent, tackling bullying, harassment and discrimination, tackling bias. It also touches on a lot of the activity that we want to do around enabling a culture where people are safe to speak up. And actually some of the feedback we heard there was this is not just feeling safe to speak up about issues and concerns. It's also about just engendering more of a culture of healthy debate and challenge, because we have such a family feel that sometimes people said it's really difficult to have those difficult conversations or to challenge somebody because I don't want to stop and they're a really close friend. There's also a piece of work here that we want to do around bringing our values to life. So really getting underneath what our behavioural standards and expectations are, what we will tolerate and what we won't tolerate, and then importantly, holding one another to account for living up to that. The final priority is around modern workforce. So making sure we've got the skills we need now for the present, but also with one eye to the skills we're going to need for the future. We know that we have got a massive transformation agenda ahead of us. We know that we need to become more digitally enabled, that we need to shift services to the community, that we need to focus on prevention, that we need to maximise regional opportunities. And all of that change is going to require our workforce to work in very different ways. Some of the specific feedback we heard underneath this one was a real desire for our people to be able to see clearly and transparently what the career path opportunities are available to them in CTM, and an understanding of what the skills and development they would need in order to move where they may want to in the future. There's also lots of work that we know we need to do here around our workforce data. So making sure that's accurate, making sure it's accessible, and making sure it can really inform decisions about workforce planning and resourcing going forward. Also, all of the work that we want to do around campus and health parks and a regionalisation agenda, and some more tactical but really important actions around We're speeding up the hiring process, getting bums on seats more quickly than we're able to at present. So you can see from the papers in the pack that we have developed a people promise for each of those priority areas, which is essentially intended to encapsulate the commitment, our ambition and our promise to our people, what we're aiming for. You'll also see that we've got a mix of what I hope are really tangible, specific actions under each of those priority areas. Some of those are intended to be delivered in the short term by 2026. Some will have a longer term trajectory. There is a real mix, I would say, of tactical quick wins within that and some of the much longer term transformational activity. But actually, that's quite a conscious decision. A lot of those quick wins were directly suggested by our staff. And I think it will probably help us generate a real sense of momentum and give us some credibility that we're putting our money where our mouth is and doing some of this stuff. In terms of monitoring progress and how we're going to evaluate success, we are proposing to have regular update sessions with trade union colleagues at LPF and LNC, and proposing that the Strategic Development Committee will be the governance route for the people plan to really hold us to account and make sure that we are delivering on actions. Underneath each of these core priorities, we will have a specific delivery plan that will have action owners, specific success measures and timelines associated to them. Comms and engagement is probably the next thing that I wanted to touch on. So we are